Chapter 465. Sardinia. Returning to this island again after 3 days, Noah actually had a feeling that things were still the same, but the people had changed. Standing on the busy street, Noah recalled that he had met a god slayer in less than an hour after coming to this world 3 days ago. He had even fought with the god slayer. Now, 3 days later, he had even decided to kill a god. Noah sighed in his heart. Who would have thought that he would encounter so many things as soon as he came to this world? Not to mention, in such a world, there were the so-called god-slayers and disobedient gods. I've really come to an incredible world. After leaving such a murmur that only he could hear, Noah lifted his feet and walked forward. Around him, on the streets that were filled with people, regardless of whether they were men, women, old or young, all of them cast their gazes in Noah's direction the moment he passed by. Their eyes were filled with amazement. Of course, this amazement was not directed at Noah, but at the two girls beside Noah. Her long golden hair and silver hair shone brightly under the light of the setting sun, even giving off a feeling of sparkling light. Erica and Liliana walked to Noah's left and right and chatted with each other. "Lily, we are now on a holiday island. Why don't you relax a little and let yourself relax?" Erica Brantley, although I know that the more important the time, the more you like to use a relaxed attitude to show your ease, at such an important moment, I really hate your pretentiousness. Have you forgotten what we are here for? You are still the same. Once you are in a bad mood, you will speak without thinking. You are always so serious, which will scare away the gentlemen who come to chat with you. I'll say it again, we are not here for a holiday, Erica. If you like to play, then play by yourself. I hope you will not disturb me. Alas, you are so rigid that you have become a poor woman who likes to fantasize about some incredible plots. I am not that kind of person. Your attitude explains everything, Lily. Tisk. You vixen. You like to play with me since I was a child. You won't let me go until now? Because Lily's reaction is really interesting, isn't it? One day, I will definitely kill you. Erica and Liliana never stopped talking like this from leaving Rome to taking the plane, from getting off the plane to entering the street. The two young ladies, who were like the sun and the moon, had dazzling golden hair and soft silver hair respectively. They accompanied Noah as if it was only natural for them to do so. The surrounding people's gazes were all focused on the two young ladies. The golden and silver young ladies seemed to have gotten used to it. They didn't mind it at all and continued to bicker while following Noah closely. Noah couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Why did you two come with me? Noah was just talking to himself. Noah had already guessed the reason. As expected, Liliana gave a serious answer. Since you don't intend to take action, it is our responsibility to stop the disaster brought by the god of disobedience. As a knight, be it me or the Bronze Cross, we have the obligation to face it. Compared to Liliana's serious reason, Electra's explanation was a little strange. Even you, who came out of nowhere, can replace Salba Lay to face the god. If I, Erica Brantley, can't show my bravery, that will be the most humiliating thing. Although Noah said that, he knew that there was another reason for these two girls to come with him. And that was to supervise Noah. To be more precise, they were here to witness the entire process of Noah challenging the god. If Noah failed, Erica and Liliana would immediately report this matter to the Bronze Cross and a Bronze Cross so that Tony, who was on standby in Rome, could rush over to clean up the mess and avoid causing more trouble. And if Noah was lucky enough to succeed, then the birth of the world's seventh king who killed a god would be a big deal, more important than the appearance of the god of disobedience. Naturally, they would need to bring back the information in this regard truthfully. After all, as the demon king that humans could not challenge, the birth of every god slayer meant that the world had one more atomic bomb that could explode at any time. Therefore, the birth of a god slayer had always been the most concerned issue in the world. In this regard, even the god of disobedience was not as important as the god slayer. That was why Erica and Liliana came with Noah, right? Of course, Erica and Liliana's reason was also one of the reasons. There was no doubt about it. Forget it. It's up to you, as long as you think it's okay, Noah paused and said as if nothing had happened. However, since you've followed me here, should I treat you as my competitors? Or should I treat you as my companions? We don't mean to disagree with you, Liliana said without hesitation. Since we're here to solve the problem of the god of disobedience, helping the people here to solve their problems is our consensus, so I'll help you. Or rather, whether we're competitors or companions, don't you think it's a good thing to let these two relationships coexist? Erica suddenly smiled in a noble manner. Just as Lily said, we're all here to solve the problem of the god of disobedience, so we should be companions. But in the process, we can show each other our talents and see who's better. Isn't that a wonderful thing? In other words. Noah glanced at Erica and Liliana. It doesn't matter if we're companions or not. You're not the kind of people who would stab me in the back at a critical moment, right? Of course. Liliana frowned. Noah Dole, do you think a knight like me would do such a despicable thing? You can't pretend that you didn't hear that. The smile on Erica's face gradually changed. If it's a duel, it should be fair and square. If you force that kind of undignified method on me, I'll take it as an insult to me. Don't be nervous. I'm just making sure. Noah spread his hands and patted his cheeks. So, where should we go next? Seeing that Noah changed the topic, Erica and Liliana didn't want to continue the conversation. They looked at each other and turned their gazes to Noah, who was walking in the middle. The god that appeared on this island appeared in the form of a young man named Wind Follower. He has also been to some ruins on this island, Erica replied. We don't know where that young god is now. Because he can transform into Wind Follower, our helpers on this island have long lost track of him. That's why we have to find God first, Liliana said in a serious tone. That god seems to have been to some ruins. Our destination is there. If I'm lucky, I might be able to find out where that god went through spirit vision. Hearing this, Noah felt relieved. Noah had more or less heard about spirit vision. It was said that it was a special ability that could decipher the mysteries of the world. Sometimes, it could even more or less see the future. There was no doubt that this ability had a lot of limitations. First of all, it had to be possessed by someone with a special constitution. Secondly, spirit vision wasn't something that could be activated at will. There was a certain probability of it happening. Therefore, if someone with the ability of spirit vision wanted to decipher any mystery, they would generally try their best to come into contact with this mystery. This could increase the probability of triggering spirit vision. Of course, there was another point. The number of things that could be seen by spirit vision depended on the aptitude of the person with the ability of spirit vision. In addition, it also needed to be random. Liliana had this ability. If Liliana went to the place where the god had been before, it was still possible for her to see the god's whereabouts. Thinking of this, Noah made a decision. Then, let's go. Chapter 466. Not long after, night came to Sardinia. For the resort island, night was also a lively time. Therefore, the streets were still crowded. Not only did the number of people not decrease, but it also gradually increased. However, this was no big deal to Noah, Erica, and Liliana, who had walked out of the streets. Perhaps it was because they had been to Sardinia before, or because they had made all the necessary preparations before departure. Erica and Liliana took Noah in a straightforward manner. They took a car and walked. Finally, when it was dark, they arrived in front of a ruin. This was a very dilapidated ruin. Whether it was the walls, stone pillars, or the ground, they all had an ancient aura and a dilapidated appearance. For example, although some walls were carved with many strange patterns, only half of them were left. For example, the stone pillar was directly broken at the waist, and the other half was horizontal between the ground and the stone pillar. Another example was that the ground was also cracked, as if something had broken out of the ground. There was no value in keeping such a ruin. However, the residents of Sardinia seemed to think that it would be bad to tear it down, so they left it here, unused. The god that appeared on this island seems to be looking for something. Erica repeated this sentence that she had heard countless times as she looked around. But, Would the thing that the god is looking for be in a place like this? The older a place is, the more secrets it must hide. The cleansing of history is not just a saying. Noah came to a broken stone pillar, reached out his hand, and gently stroked the rough surface of the pillar. However, that god obviously didn't find what he was looking for, which is why he's still wandering. He hasn't caused any trouble, right? To humans, the god of disobedience was like a ferocious beast running into the streets. There was no need to mention the danger. After all, the god of disobedience was a god of the opposite path. This kind of god generally had two characteristics. 1. Paranoia. Because they did not have desires like humans, the god of disobedience would carry out their instincts and duties in an extremely paranoid and crazy way. For example, if a god of war became the god of disobedience, then in order to be able to fight, he would do anything at all costs, including destroying all of humanity. And if the god of disobedience that appeared was the kind of divinity that spread death and plague, then the other party would take this responsibility as the meaning of life and would not hesitate to turn all the places he passed into hell and death. 2. Unscrupulous. To gods, human lives were like beasts. Even if they killed them, they would not feel any guilt. Just like how humans killed birds, if necessary, the god of disobedience would not hesitate because of human lives. If a hornet's nest in a person's home, he would do his best to get rid of it. Gods were the same. Once God thought that humans were in his way, he would not hesitate to eradicate all humans in his sight. Even if they looked similar, gods and humans, they were. Therefore, just as humans could slaughter chickens, ducks, and geese without any guilt, human lives were no different from chickens, ducks, and geese to God. Therefore, once the god of disobedience with such values appeared, it would definitely cause trouble. For this reason, the magic societies in all corners of the world had the obligation to treat the god of disobedience as an enemy in order to protect themselves and others. Not to mention, the existence of gods would also cause all kinds of trouble, which would indirectly affect the world. Now, the god who could turn into a youth and wind had not caused any trouble for the time being because he was looking for something. However, once he found what he wanted, he would not be able to remain calm. Like Noah and Erica, Liliana was also in the ruins. The girl swayed her silver ponytail, constantly wandering around the ruins and doing all kinds of things. Sometimes she touched the stone wall. Sometimes she put her face on the stone pillar. Sometimes she just lay on the ground and closed her eyes. Sometimes she seemed to be absent-minded, as if she was being pulled by invisible strings, walking back and forth. Seeing Liliana like this, Noah and Erica both kept their mouths shut and did not disturb her. Under such circumstances, Liliana arrived in front of a stone wall at an unknown time. Her pupils suddenly lost focus, but her eyes lit up with a dim light. Youth. Wind. Guardian of the crown. Sun. At the sight of this, Noah and Erica's spirits were lifted at the same time. They quietly came to Liliana's back and watched her silently. Walk, to seek victory, and also to seek defeat, Liliana kept murmuring as if in a dream. After a while, the light in her eyes began to dissipate. Her slackened pupils gradually condensed, and her expression became relatively bright. Oh. Erica smiled elegantly. It seems that Lily has discovered something. How is it? Noah asked directly. Did you see anything? Liliana nodded heavily, but her expression became a little distressed. But that's not good news. Hearing this, Noah and Erica looked at each other and nodded. Let's find a hotel first. Noah made a decision decisively. Anyway, it's impossible to find that god today. Let's rest while sorting out the information we got. Liliana hesitated for a moment but did not object. She nodded in agreement. Just like that, a man and two women walked out of the ruins. On a holiday island like Sardinia, not only were there small stalls and canteens, but there were also high-end restaurants. Noah had only been in this world for less than 4 to 5 days. During these 4 to 5 days, he had been dragged around by Donnie. Naturally, he did not have the money of this world. However, as prodigies of the Copper Black Cross and the Bronze Black Cross, one of the most famous magic societies in Italy, Erica and Liliana were not short of money. Therefore, under Erica's suggestion, the three chose a hotel with a high-end restaurant. They first ordered food, then listened to Liliana's explanation while filling their stomachs. My spirit vision did see that great existence. Liliana began to explain with a serious expression. That's a god of war for victory. No, it should be said that he himself represents victory and the guardian of the king and the people, the trusted aid of the sun, the undefeated ancient Persian god of war. The god of victory? Or the guardian of the king and the people? The trusted aid of the sun and the ancient Persian god of war? Erica was stunned when she heard Liliana say such words. Hey, Lily, could that god be? It should be what you think. Liliana sighed. I only saw some fragments, but it's not difficult to guess that person's identity. That's true. Erica frowned and became distressed. After all, that god is very famous. What are you talking about? Noah said unhappily. Unlike you magicians who have learned about gods since young in order to deal with gods, I don't know much about gods. Who are you talking about? We're talking about the ancient Persian god of war, the guardian of the god of light, Mitra. Since Mitra is the incarnation of the sun, this god also has a deep relationship with the sun, Liliana explained. He's the invincible god of war with 10 incarnations. In West Asia, he's known as the guardian of light. He has the same origin as India's Thunder Emperor Indra. Not only is he a god of victory, but he's also the guardian of the king and the people. Velaslana. Erica finally said the name of that god. Because he's the Persian god of war, you might not know much about him, but this god of victory is no ordinary god. In the myths, he's an undefeated god. Hearing this, Noah frowned. A god of victory? Didn't that mean that if Noah wanted to slay a god, it was equivalent to doing something that no man or god in the myths could do? Was it that difficult? That might be the worst god for you. Liliana seemed to understand Noah's thoughts, but she revealed another piece of news. The most troublesome thing is that now, this god is preparing to summon another god. Chapter 467. Summoning another god? Noah and Erica were both stunned and surprised. My spirit vision did capture it. The ancient Persian god of war is looking for the god sleeping on this island. Liliana's tone was a little heavy. It is precisely because he wants to wake up the god sleeping on this island that the god of war has been wandering around the various ruins of Sardinia. Because he wants to wake up the god, he also left his own cursed power in those ruins. That's why I was able to successfully trigger spirit vision. In other words, the reason why the god hasn't made a fuss until now is not because he doesn't want to, but because he wants to make a fuss? Noah said in surprise. Is there no way for humans to satisfy him at this level? If you think about it carefully, it might be possible. Erica frowned deeply. The ancient Persian god of war is known to be invincible. Now that he has become a rebellious god of disobedience, it's not strange that he wants to find an opponent who can fight with him. Fortunately, Sarbatrem, who stayed on this island not long ago, has already left. Otherwise, Velaslana's target wouldn't be the god sleeping on this island, but the deicide, Liliana said with a troubled expression on her face. One god is troublesome enough. If Velaslana wakes up another god, it will be really bad. Hey, Lily. Erica seemed to have thought of something and suddenly changed the topic. You said that Velaslana is trying to awaken the god sleeping on this island, but in the myths, there is only one god who can rival the god of victory and has a deep relationship with this island. Isn't there only one god? Although I don't want to admit it, my thoughts are the same as yours. Liliana sighed. To be able to catch the eye of the god of war and have a deep relationship with this island, if I'm not wrong, it should be Mekhl. As soon as this was said, the man and two women, including Noah, fell silent. Noah was not very familiar with Velaslana, the god of war from ancient Persia. However, Noah had heard of Mekhl's words before. Or rather, he had read about it in a book. He was the hero god in Canaan mythology. He was the god of the city in the Phoenician port city of Tyre. He was equivalent to Hercules and the patron god of the voyagers, Maricourts. Tyre was a city built by the Phoenicians. It was also the home port of the Phoenicians, the tyrants of the ancient Mediterranean. However, the Phoenicians were once the rulers of Sardinia. Therefore, the god that the Phoenicians believed in, Mekhl, became the god that had a deep affinity with Sardinia. Mekhl was a god-king who possessed the attributes of wind, lightning, sky, and so on. There were also gods like Zeus and Odin, who were well known as the highest gods. There was no doubt that they were the highest gods. Now, the invincible war god of ancient Persia was planning to awaken the divine king who could rival him in battle. That would be a disaster for humans. Noah, Erica, and Liliana did not doubt that if the two famous gods were to fight, it was absolutely possible that the entire Sardinia would be affected and sunk. The invincible war god and the highest divine king. Noah felt his head start to hurt. Do we have to make it so difficult? No, it's too early to make a conclusion. Erica shook her head. Lana hasn't awakened Mekhl yet. Things haven't reached the worst point yet. We still have a way to stop it. The problem is that if we want to stop the war god, there is no doubt that we will have to clash head-on with him. Liliana confirmed with Noah worriedly. Are you sure you can do it? Without Tony's help, Erica and Liliana could only rely on Noah. After all, Noah was the one who really had to deal with the god of disobedience. However, the gods that appeared this time were not ordinary. One of them was the undefeated war god, and the other one had yet to appear, but once he did, he would be at the highest level. He was definitely not below Lana, the god king. Dealing with these two gods, even if Tony, the god slayer, came, there was a high chance that he would be defeated. And Noah was just an ordinary person. No, it was a bit too much to say that he was an ordinary person. Noah could withstand Tony's magical sword unscathed, and he was stronger than many of the so-called paladins who stood at the peak of humans in this world. But he was still human after all. Want to fight with the gods? It was not impossible, but it was a matter of whether he could do it in the end. Under Erica and Liliana's gazes, Noah curled his lips into a smile. You know what? A man can't say no. Without giving Erica and Liliana a chance to react, Noah turned his head and asked Liliana. Do you know where Lana is now? As for the specific location, I don't know now. Liliana was startled at first, but then she answered reflexively. However, the war god's purpose is to awaken the divine king, Mekhl. As long as he moves, he will definitely emit fluctuations of spell power. I have already used spirit vision to capture Lana once in that ruin, so as long as he gathers his spell power again, I will sense it. Then there's no problem. Noah's expression relaxed. Let's find Lana first, and then we'll act according to the situation. With that, Noah stood up and said to Erica and Liliana, who were still in a daze, don't worry. It's getting late, and it's time to rest. Tomorrow will be very busy. After saying this, Noah went straight to the counter. Wait. Wait. Erica and Liliana woke up and quickly stood up and chased after him. The next day, early morning, today, Noah woke up early in the morning. He got up when the sun had just risen. After washing up, Noah walked out of the hotel and looked at the deserted street. After a while, his eyes fixed on a vast square next to the hotel. Yesterday, when Noah, Erica, and Liliana came to this hotel, this vast square was already filled with all kinds of stalls. But now, the sun had just risen, and there were not many people on the street. Naturally, there would not be any stalls in this square. And this square just happened to be Noah's target. Coming to this square, Noah closed his eyes and took a deep breath of fresh air. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes. Boom! Surging blue flames centered on the star pattern that suddenly appeared on Noah's chest. It suddenly burned and turned into a pitch-black knight's sword, falling into Noah's hand. Holding that knight's sword tightly, Noah raised it in front of him and pointed the tip of the sword forward, as if aiming at an invisible enemy. He began to concentrate. In the battle against the gods, Noah could only rely on the two weapons in his soul. Because, whether it was the God Slayer or the God of Disobedience, they both had an extremely foul physique. The nullification of magic. No. Not just magic. Spells, yin-yang spells, and so on, as long as they were used against the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience, they would all be nullified, even if they were beneficial spells such as healing and support. In other words, the magic and spells that Noah mastered could not be used against the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience, unless it was a magic that worked on himself like the enhancement magic. Otherwise, as long as it was used against the gods, it would be nullified. In this way, Noah's strength was equivalent to wasting more than half, and he could only rely on the two weapons in his soul and his own skills. This was quite a disadvantageous situation, and it also made Noah realize how foul the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience were. However, there was no turning back. Since he had decided, Noah would not go back on his words. If he wanted to obtain authority and become a God Slayer, he would not have the consciousness to risk his life. It was better to go home early, wash up, and sleep. What Noah could do was to race against time to strengthen the cards that he could use. At this time, a voice sounded from behind Noah. "Is that your sword?" Hearing this, Noah's hand movement stopped and looked behind him. He saw that Liliana, who was dressed in a blue and black formal dress, walked towards Noah with a proper posture, and a trace of curiosity appeared on her usually serious face. "Do you want to compete with me?" Chapter 468. Would you like to have a duel with me? While saying that, Liliana's eyes began to burn with passion. "I, Liliana Kranikar, request an audience with your sword, the Grand Knight of the Bronze Black Cross, whom even Minister Sarbatrii praised." At this moment, Liliana's voice was full of provocation, just like Erica's. From this provocation, Noah didn't sense any hostility, but her fighting spirit was awe-inspiring. Noah had heard this tone from Erica more than once in the past few days. And the reason why Erica used this tone was obvious to Noah even if he used his knees to guess. It was because only 2 people in the entire Italy had achieved the rank of a Grand Knight when they were still underage. Erica and Liliana were known as prodigies by the relevant people in the magic world. It wasn't difficult to understand why Erica would be so confident after achieving such an achievement when she was still underage. For such a talented prodigy, how could she easily admit that others were better than her? However, Noah's excellence was beyond doubt. Because he, as an ordinary human, blocked the power of a God Slayer. If Noah were an old man in his 70s or 80s, Erica and Liliana would definitely not mind Noah who had achieved such an achievement. Unfortunately, Noah was only a young man who wasn't even 20 years old. In terms of age, Noah was only 3 to 4 years older than Erica and Liliana. However, a person who was only 3 to 4 years older than them had achieved something that even the Holy Knights, who had the highest honor and rank, couldn't do, which stimulated Erica's and Liliana's self-confidence. Under such circumstances, it was only natural that Erica would constantly use a provocative tone to talk to Noah in an attempt to prove herself. At first, Noah thought that Liliana didn't care about this, but now it seemed that Liliana was just not as unscrupulous as Erica. She also had the intention to challenge Noah. In this regard, Noah just stared at Liliana's eyes that were full of fighting spirit. After a while, the corners of his mouth curled up. "Well, it's not a bad idea to treat it as a morning exercise. Then I won't stand on ceremony." Liliana's eyes flashed and she stretched out her hand in the direction of Noah. "My wings, the steel that forms the phantom blades. Silver Master Alchemist, bestow me strength." When such an incantation sounded, a glimmer of light emerged on Liliana's slender body and turned into a weapon that fell into her hand. It was a silver-white saber. Whoosh! With a sudden swing of the saber in her hand, Liliana assumed an attacking posture while her eyes were fixed on Noah. "Nice to meet you." "Likewise." Compared to Liliana's extremely ornamental posture, Noah just lightly raised that knight's sword in his hand and pointed it at Liliana. "Come on. You can attack at will." This sentence sounded like he was looking down on his opponent, but Liliana did not feel angry at all. Instead, her expression was solemn. It was not the first time that Liliana saw such a casual posture without tensing up his body. Italy's King of Swords was almost the same after drawing his sword. He did not assume any stance, just relaxed his body, and the right hand holding the sword drooped down casually. Anyone who had seen Salvar Doni's swordsmanship would know how frightening that seemingly unprofessional and belittling stance was. Because if there was no stance, it meant that any move could be derived. Doni did not need any offensive or defensive stance. His swordsmanship had already been completely integrated with his body. Even if he had lost all his memories, once he fought, that amazing swordsmanship could still be performed by relying on his body's memory. Therefore, Doni's stance was useful even when fighting against an extraordinary enemy like God. It was truly a realm where he did not need any moves to adapt to the situation. The East called this realm, having no moves is better than having moves. Liliana, who had seen this realm, saw that although Noah was not sloppy, he was more casual and relaxed than Doni. Naturally, all the vigilance in her heart exploded. Sure enough, in terms of swordsmanship, he's already comparable to Salvar Lay. Liliana's expression became more and more solemn, but the scorching heat in her eyes became more and more intense. However, this is what makes the challenge meaningful. As soon as she finished speaking, she looked at Noah, who was casually standing in front of her. She slowly clenched the silver Grandmaster Craftsman sword in her hand, and a faint spell power quickly flowed on the surface of her body, giving Liliana a sense of tyrannical power. Hey dash! With a clear shout, Liliana tapped the ground with the tip of her toes and charged straight at Noah, who was close at hand. She slightly bent her wrist, and the blade of the military knife in her hand glowed with a cold light. When she was only half a meter away from Noah, she suddenly stopped and drew a tricky arc in front of Noah. Chi! Like a flash of silver light, Liliana's military knife turned into lightning and shot straight at Noah's direction. Looking at the incoming military knife, Noah just raised his hand unhurriedly and pointed the knight's sword in his hand. Ding! In the next moment, the tip of the pitch-black knight's sword accurately hit the tip of Liliana's military saber. With a crisp sound, the military saber was pushed back. Clang! The sudden force acting on the military knife made Liliana's body feel as if she was hit by something. She instantly retreated more than 10 steps, and after a while, she stopped her body awkwardly. Liliana's expression changed. She gritted her teeth and mixed some curse power with the military knife in her hand. Her body rushed toward Noah again. The military knife turned into a flash of silver light and suddenly stabbed out. Ding! Another crisp sound rang out. But this time, the tip of Liliana's military knife accurately pointed at the tip of the pitch-black knight's sword that Noah had not yet retracted. Perhaps, Liliana wanted to return an eye for an eye? However, Noah narrowed his eyes slightly. His hand that was holding the sword suddenly turned and retracted, pulling the knight's sword back. Then, something strange happened. Liliana's silver Grandmaster Craftsman seemed to be directly attracted by Noah's knight's sword. As Noah retracted the knight's sword, Liliana and her sword were pulled over. Wadash! Liliana's heart skipped a beat. Her feet subconsciously gripped the ground, but her body still drew an arc in the air and crashed straight into Noah. Then, looking at Noah, who was getting closer and closer to her, Liliana's gaze turned cold. She simply gave up resisting and let her body crash into Noah's direction. The curse power in her body quickly condensed on her palm and quickly gathered on the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. If you can't resist, then attack. With a cold shout, Liliana's body turned and she fiercely tightened the military knife in her hand. Accompanied by a sharp wind-breaking sound, she fiercely slashed toward Noah's shoulder. Feeling the sharp wind coming toward him, Noah's hand tightened. The knight's sword suddenly slashed out like a meteor and once again accurately pointed at Liliana's silver Grandmaster Craftsman. Ding! This time, it was on the blade of the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. A violent force gushed out along with Noah's stab, causing the tip of the knight's sword to ignite a spark on the blade of the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. An invisible repulsive force fiercely hit Liliana's silver Grandmaster Craftsman. After a moment of stalemate, it rushed toward Liliana's direction like a shock wave. Bang! Liliana only felt a huge force coming from the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. Her body was shocked by the repulsive force and she slid more than 10 meters on the ground, leaving a long shoe print on the ground. Ha! Ha! Liliana could not help but gasp. First, she glanced at Noah, who did not even move from his position, then she looked at her trembling hand that was holding the knife. Her eyes fluctuated. So strong. This person is so strong. Maybe, he can really, how is it? Noah raised his eyebrows. Still want to go? Hearing this, Liliana's expression became uncertain. In the end, she sighed and shook her head. I lost. Noah smiled. Chapter 469. Here. After buying the cold drinks from the small stall that had just been set up, Noah walked towards Liliana, who was sitting on the bench in the square, and passed one of the bottles to her. Although it's not a strenuous exercise, it's better to drink it. Hearing this, Liliana looked at the cold drink in front of her. After hesitating for a while, she nodded her head. Accepting gifts from others without any reason is not something that a knight should do. However, since it's done out of goodwill, it's a different story. I'll accept it with gratitude. After speaking like an honest and upright official in the face of a bribe, Liliana politely reached out her hand and took the cold drink in Noah's hand while Noah was at a loss of whether to laugh or cry. Perhaps because she was too concerned about whether she should accept it or not, Liliana's hand accidentally touched Noah's hand. Eh. Suddenly, Liliana opened her eyes wide and blushed. She quickly retracted her hand. Seeing this, Noah tilted his head and asked curiously. What are you doing? No, nothing. Liliana replied loudly, giving Noah a shock. What's wrong with this girl all of a sudden? Little did he know that Liliana seemed to have thought of something and looked at Noah shyly. You. Could it be that you deliberately did this to me for this purpose? Huh? Noah was at a loss. What purpose? What do you mean? Just. Liliana seemed to be very nervous as she twisted her hand. She lowered her head and said shyly. To touch my hand, give me water, what? Liliana's voice was too soft. Noah frowned and subconsciously moved his head closer to her. Say that again? Looking at Noah's head that suddenly moved closer, Liliana shouted and jumped up. She pulled a distance away from Noah and pointed at Noah with a flushed face and shouted. What are you trying to do? The corner of Noah's mouth twitched as he looked at Liliana, whose beautiful face was flushed and her eyes were moist. However, she was looking at him warily. It was said that geniuses were generally weird. Could it be that Liliana was a typical example? If Noah knew that Liliana had such a series of reactions because she touched Noah's hand, he would be even more speechless. Was there a need to have such a strong reaction? Was it better to be pure? Or was it better to be too sensitive? Of course, Noah would never have imagined that Liliana would have such a reaction. It was all because she was too delusional. Although I don't know what's wrong with you, Noah rolled his eyes speechlessly. But, if you don't want to interact with me, then I'll go back. No, it's not like that. Liliana finally calmed down. While feeling ashamed of her excessive behavior just now, she pretended to be calm. I'm sorry, there was an accident just now. Please don't mind. After saying that, Liliana returned to her seat on the bench and sat down. She stared at the cold drink in Noah's hand and immediately reached out her hand to snatch the cold drink from him at lightning speed. I will accept your kindness. That's good. Noah really didn't know what to say. What was certain was that Liliana didn't seem to be as rigid as she looked on the surface. Instead, there was a very strange part of her. With a new understanding of Liliana, Noah sat down next to Liliana. Looking at the bustling street ahead, he asked very casually. You're up so early? Where's Miss Erica? Don't compare me with her. Liliana, who was still in the state of a young girl a second ago, was suddenly stimulated. She regained her usual solemn and awe-inspiring manner and even declared, "Unlike those who lays in bed every day, as a knight, I have strict requirements for my work and rest schedule. Under normal circumstances, I won't change my work and rest schedule at will." I didn't know that Miss Erica would lays in bed. Noah curled his lips. Sometimes, I really feel that you two are indeed childhood sweethearts. His words made Liliana frown very obviously. She said in a very resistant manner, "That's right. I don't understand why you think so. Isn't it?" Noah replied, "Both of you are known as prodigies in the magic world. But as knights, one is obviously willful and casual while the other is obviously strict and inflexible. From an extreme perspective, don't you feel that you two are compatible?" Liliana's face instantly turned gloomy. If your childhood sweetheart invites you to watch a horror movie when you want to watch a movie, or happily eats desserts in front of you when you want to lose weight, you won't think so. He felt that the topic had become heavy all of a sudden. To what extent was this seductive female knight persecuted by that willful Miss Erica? At the thought of this, Noah could not help but feel pity for Liliana. He quickly laughed and drank his cold drink. "Oh yeah, what was that sword move just now?" Liliana seemed to have the intention to change the topic. Her expression became serious. "That sword move that attracted my Grandmaster Silver Craftsman and pulled me over, was it some kind of magic?" "That's not magic. It's just a simple technique." Noah shrugged. "The trick is in the control of strength. This is the application of using softness to overcome hardness and leveraging strength to counter strength. You should be able to understand. That sword move contains such a great mystery." Liliana looked at Noah blankly. After a while, she sighed. "It seems that I still underestimated your ability. I've seen a sword skill that even Ching Ching is inferior to. Noah Doria, you are indeed a person who is more talented than Ching Ching in swordsmanship." Italy's king of swords was a rare genius who did not know anything other than swordsmanship. This was something that everyone knew. This king didn't know anything about magic, spells, or anything like that, but he had an extraordinary obsession with swords. If it was just a competition of swords, even if one didn't take into account power, it was impossible to find a match for him in the whole of Italy. In this aspect, being able to be comparable to the King of Swords meant that Noah's swordsmanship was unparalleled in the entire Italy and even the entire world. But if you want to kill a god, you can't do it with just strength. Liliana changed the topic. She looked straight at the gradually bustling street in front of her and said solemnly without looking back, "Even if you can surpass Qing in swordsmanship, the second King of Swords is not so easy to be born. What's more, the god that appeared this time is the god of war who represents victory. It is also very likely that the king of gods of the Mediterranean Sea will be involved." Liliana turned her head and looked straight at Noah. "Even so, you still think that you can succeed?" Noah drank the cold drink silently. After drinking all the drink in the bottle, he threw it away casually. The empty bottle drew a perfect parabola in the air and fell accurately into a trash can. "Perhaps, in your eyes, a guy like me who takes the initiative to challenge a god and even wants to kill a god is like an idiot who overestimates himself, right?" Noah smiled indifferently. "But, such an idiot, didn't the 6 god slayers whom you respect as kings used to be like that in the past?" Liliana was speechless. Since it's not something that's absolutely impossible, it's still too early to make such a judgment. Noah turned his head and met Liliana's gaze. His dark and deep eyes were shining brightly. "It's just like how you know that I'm stronger than you, but you still challenge me. I'm just exaggerating the same thing by a few levels. Regardless of whether I succeed or fail in the end, at least I have the confidence to keep my life. Since that's the case, why don't I challenge you once?" Noah's dark and deep eyes stared at Noah closely. Looking at his face that was close at hand and listening to his somewhat handsome speech, Liliana felt her heart beating a little faster. Her pretty face blushed again. "Rumble." At this moment, a shocking thunder suddenly sounded in the sky, startling Noah, Liliana, and everyone on the street. The originally clear sky was suddenly covered by a thick layer of clouds, becoming incomparably dark. Dazzling flashes of lightning flashed within, and the sound of thunder constantly rang out. Chapter 470. Rumble. The shocking sound of thunder continued to reverberate in the thick clouds. Thick bolts of lightning were like meteors colliding with each other. They flashed in the thick dark clouds and rolled back and forth, causing the sky to become extremely oppressive. The residents and tourists on the streets who thought that it was going to rain began to rush in the direction of their homes or hotels. Those who were setting up their stalls and preparing to make a fortune today were grumbling as they quickly packed up their stalls and walked away. Not long after, there were only a few passers-by and Noah and Liliana who didn't move at all in the square and the entire street. A man and a woman stood under the gloomy and cold sky, looking up at the scene where the sky that was clear not long ago suddenly became like the end of the world. Their expressions turned solemn. Noah Dole. Liliana's palms began to sweat unknowingly, but her voice was still as stern as ever. Do you feel it? At this level, if you still can't feel it, you can really go home, wash up, and sleep. Noah stared at the dark sky and narrowed his eyes. This is not a simple storm. There is an extremely large amount of cursed power gathering in the clouds. In other words, it was not a natural phenomenon, but a man-made phenomenon. No. It was impossible for an ordinary person to cause such a phenomenon that was thicker than a normal storm. Affecting the weather was not something that could be done by ordinary power. Therefore, whether it was Noah or Liliana, they could only think of one possibility. God. Liliana's eyes glowed with a faint light. I see it. It's God's power that is affecting the weather. Is it Welslana? Noah immediately asked. Does the ever-victorious god of war also have the power to cause such a phenomenon? The ancient Persian god of war, the god of victory, often incarnated into 10 forms in myths and traveled between heaven and the human world. Perhaps because the wind was getting stronger, Liliana began to raise her voice. Strong wind, bull, white horse, camel, mountain boar, young man, phoenix, shepherd, goat, and human warrior with a golden sword. There are a total of 10 incarnations, and each incarnation has a different power. Among these 10 incarnations, the goat incarnation can summon lightning and thunder. If this phenomenon was caused by Welslana, then now, the god of war should be using the goat incarnation. Liliana's face showed a hint of uneasiness as she said this. However, to be able to affect the weather to such an extent, without a certain degree of control over the sky, and there's the storm, this was beyond the reach of the power of Welslana's goat incarnation. Liliana didn't say it out loud, but Noah could understand it. Storm. Sky. Lightning. Noah said in a monotonous voice. It seems that we have to prepare for the appearance of another god. The moment he finished speaking, a surge of power that was more powerful than the power gathered in the sky rose from the direction of the seaside. Over there. Liliana pointed in the direction of the huge surge of cursed power and shouted. God is there. Even without Liliana's reminder, Noah could guess it. Noah had only seen such a large amount of power from himself and Tony. He had never seen a third person who could gather such a large amount of power. This level of cursed power could only be possessed by the god that appeared on this island. There was no other possibility for this level of cursed power. Lily. At this moment, a voice came from the direction of the hotel. Electra, who was dressed in a red and black outfit that was not far off from Liliana's, walked toward Noah and Liliana with a smile as fierce as a lion's on her face. It's time for the duel. Against the storm, Noah and Liliana were flying in the sky. They turned into 2 streams of light and flew toward the seaside. Noah used the death feather form of the magician. What Liliana used was a witch spell called flight. Erica, who could not use the witch spell, was in Liliana's arms. Unlike magic, witches were magic that could only be used by pure witches. While Liliana Kranikar was a knight, she was also a witch. In the world of magic, the title of which had great significance. Erica was also a witch in a broad sense. To be more precise, she was a female magician who used magic. There was a difference between a pure magician and a witch. Erica was only a magician who could use magic, while Liliana was the last descendant of those witches and priestesses who became saintesses in the beginning of the era. Just like Aoizi and Yuju, one could only use magic, while the other had the bloodline of a witch. The difference naturally arose. The witch spell referred to the magic that only pure-blooded witches could use. The knowledge and magic that belonged to witches were passed down orally by Liliana from the previous generation of witches. Only Liliana, the last descendant of a witch, could use the spells. Under such circumstances, the three of them flew in the direction of the sea, braving the strong winds. In the next second, Noah, Erica, and Liliana saw it. They saw a giant. It was a giant with messy, fluffy hair and a beard that covered the lower half of his face. He looked rather wild and unruly, and was more than 20 meters tall. On the giant's body, muscles bulged constantly. Just by looking at him, one would feel that he was very bold. He wore rough clothes. His clothes were made of dirty rags and leather. However, not only did this appearance not give people a disheveled and dirty feeling, on the contrary, it could make people involuntarily feel a sense of majesty. Just looking at it would make people want to lower their heads and retreat in an extremely oppressive manner. On the other side of the giant, a 14 or 15-year-old boy, who was even smaller than an average adult, hovered in midair and confronted the giant fearlessly. The young man's clothes were not so much the clothes of this harbor street, but more like the clothes he wore in the oasis in the desert. He was dressed in ancient Roman attire. His jet-black hair reached his shoulders, and his skin was ivory. The young man was very good-looking, and his facial features were very regular. There was even a bit of a neutral feeling. He was a beautiful young man who couldn't be picked out at all. However, not only did this beautiful young man violate Newton's law and hover in midair, but his cloak also fluttered in the strong wind. His body also surged with an aura that wasn't any weaker than that of the giant. This told others that he wasn't an ordinary person who couldn't even truss up a chicken. The two figures, one big and one small, confronted each other in the ocean. The aura that gushed out of their bodies like a storm not only covered the entire ocean and sky, but also swept in all directions, shrouding Noah, Erica, and Liliana who were flying over. Almost at the same time, Noah, Erica, and Liliana came to a sudden halt and froze in midair. Under the shroud of the terrifying aura, Erica and Liliana were completely immobilized. Not only were their eyes and faces full of horror, but even their foreheads were dripping with cold sweat. These two prodigies didn't seem to have any experience facing the gods. Now that they had encountered the two gods of the highest level, the aura that leaked out was enough to awe the two genius girls on the spot. Noah was the only one who maintained his composure, but his expression was still solemn. He glanced at Erica and Liliana, took a deep breath, and suddenly spoke. "If you want to retreat, this is your last chance." Upon hearing that, Erica's and Liliana's pretty faces changed drastically. Humiliation, powerlessness, and anger at themselves. All kinds of emotions made these two talented girls bite their teeth and lips hard. Immediately, Erica said loudly, "I'm Erica Brantery." Liliana also spoke with a determined expression. "As a knight, I'm absolutely not allowed to abandon my companions and retreat." "Is that so?" Noah closed his eyes and suddenly opened them after a while. "Then, let's begin. To slay the gods." Chapter 471. Crackle, crackle. In the dark clouds, the sound of lightning and thunder continued to reverberate. Walala. No one knew when it started, but the violent winds and torrential rain had also affected Sardinia, bringing about a weather phenomenon no less than a level 10 typhoon. Under such a vile environment, the tall giant and the young man floating in the air continued to face each other with calm expressions. They did not care about the vile weather and torrential rain at all. They were as unmoving as a mountain, and the aura emitted from their bodies was even more frightening than the torrential rain. Mekker, one of the strongest gods in the Mediterranean Sea, the king of the gods, the great warrior, the strongest dragon slayer, we finally meet. In the violent winds, the young man faced the giant that covered the sky. Not only did he not show the slightest trace of fear, but he also showed an extremely joyful and unruly look. I am Welslana, I am the victor. Victory is always in my hands. This is my essence. No matter what battle I encounter, no matter what enemy I face, my victory will not change and cannot be shaken. That is why I have not experienced the taste of defeat until now, because no one can defeat me. With such an arrogant declaration that seemed to be able to shake the heavens and earth, the god of victory named Welslana laughed, his face full of arrogance. God King Mekar, can you grant me a defeat? As soon as the words came out, the tall giant immediately lowered his head and looked at Welslana, who was floating in the air not far from him. He let out a cold snort that could cause the sea to churn. Welslana, the guardian of Mitra, as the god of light who used to protect the royal power, you actually dare to challenge me, the king. You deserve to die 10,000 times. Indeed, I used to be the guardian of the people and the royal power, but now I am only the god of disobedience. What remains in this body is only the will to fight and win. Welslana smiled calmly, but his expression was still full of arrogance. Mekar, satisfy me. Give me a fight that can calm the will to fight in my body. Ha 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 ha. Mekar couldn't help but laugh out loud. His laughter was deafening, and the sound waves even blew away the surrounding storm. Speaking of which, this old man is now Bodeo's god of disobedience. Although I'm a king, I'm also a warrior. I'm a dragon slayer, the god of victory. Let my staff smash your arrogant face. As soon as he finished speaking, a pair of crude clubs appeared in Mekal's hands. They were a pair of sticks that appeared amidst the storm and lightning. Although its appearance was extremely crude, the wind and lightning flashing back and forth on it brought about waves of fluctuations, causing the space to tremble. Ha 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 ha. Welslana also laughed out loud because of his excessive excitement. The cloak behind him fluttered, and an extremely terrifying cursed power rose with his petite body as the center. Come on. The king of the Mediterranean. The heavy atmosphere in the air exploded at the slightest touch. Just as the ever-victorious war god and the king of gods were about to engage in a devastating battle, a slightly frivolous voice rang out. If that's the case, can you count me in? The voice was very soft, so soft that it was covered by the storm in less than a second. However, whether it was Welslana or Mekal, they were not ordinary people. They were the highest gods in the myths, so naturally, they couldn't miss it. At that moment, Welslana and Mekal both stopped what they were doing and turned their heads to look in the direction of the island. There, in mid-air, a figure with two pairs of light wings made of black light behind his back braved the storm and entered the eyes of the two gods. Welslana was slightly startled and said in surprise. Human? Human? Mekal's voice sounded like thunder, and his sharp gaze was directly cast. A mere human, how dare you appear in front of us gods? The moment he was stared at by Welslana and Mekal, Noah felt as if his whole body was wrapped by an invisible pressure, and his body was constantly being pulled down. Welslana was the guardian of the people and the royal authority. Although he was not the king, he represented the royal authority itself. In addition to the great cause of protecting the people, he could make all humans accept his protection and make them submit at the same time. Mekal was the king of gods and the former king of the Mediterranean. He also had the power to make humans submit. The two of them were the highest gods in all aspects. Now, they were aiming their auras at Noah. Even if they didn't deliberately use their power, their auras and words were enough to make humans kneel down and submit to them. Unfortunately, Noah was not an ordinary human. Like Erica and Liliana, Noah had no experience of facing a god directly. However, Noah had seen Gaia and Aleia, who were even more majestic than gods. In addition, in the past few days, he had been fighting with the god slayer, Tony, who was on par with the gods. Coupled with the countless battles he had experienced in the past and the temperament he had cultivated since childhood, it was impossible to make Noah submit with just their auras. Therefore, under the monstrous auras of the two gods, Noah only felt his shoulders sink. After circulating the magic in his body, he recovered. He was not affected at all. Oh. Velaslana raised an eyebrow, and his tone began to have a hint of curiosity. What an amazing dochi. You seem to be a brave warrior as well. So, I'm here to challenge you. It was unknown when Noah had grasped a completely black knight's sword in his hand. He raised it and pointed it in the direction of the two gods, declaring loudly. The two of you, do you want to fight with me? The whole place was suddenly silent. A heavy pressure spread out in the space, covering the entire world in an instant. You actually pointed your sword at me, the king of the gods? Mechal's voice had a hint of majesty and anger. Human, are you ready to atone for your sins with your death? You have the courage to challenge a god, but you should consider your own strength, boy. Velaslana glanced at Noah and smirked. In front of you is the god of victory, who is always victorious. Human, you should back down. Seeing that the two gods treated his actions as an offense instead of a challenge, Noah felt helpless even though he had expected it. Since you are a god who represents victory, then you should know what causes defeat on the battlefield, right? Noah looked directly at Velaslana and said with a hint of provocation. I am indeed just a human, but I have power. Since I have power, then I have the qualifications to fight. I did not come here to compete with you in terms of status, nor to compete with you in terms of strength. I only have one goal, and that is to win. Aren't you the god of victory? Aren't you looking for defeat? Noah's voice kept echoing. It penetrated the storm and drilled into Velaslana's ears. Then let's fight. I will use any means necessary. I will let you taste the taste of defeat. Hearing this, Velaslana widened his eyes slightly and looked at Noah, who was stirring up a large amount of magic. He suddenly laughed, and laughed very happily. Good. I didn't expect a human to know the true meaning of victory. As the god of war who is always victorious, I can't ignore the challenge of a warrior who pursues victory. Come with me. Knowing that his provocation was successful, Noah controlled the magician behind him and his body turned into a stream of light and swept in another direction. My strength is weaker than yours, so I will choose a terrain that is advantageous to me to fight with you. Everything is for victory. If you are afraid, you can choose not to come. With that, Noah's body quickly disappeared into the storm. Velaslana's face was filled with joy. His body suddenly turned into a tornado and swept in the direction where Noah disappeared. Human. God of war. Are you trying to abandon me, the king? Mechal shouted angrily. Unforgivable. As soon as he finished speaking, Mechal's huge body turned into a flash of lightning and swept into the sky and disappeared. It was only then that Liliana, who was carrying Erica, leaped from the direction of the beach. This way, no matter how fierce the battle is, at least nothing will happen to this island. Liliana looked at Erica. What should we do next? Follow him. Erica answered without hesitation. We must witness this battle. Liliana nodded heavily and flew into the sky. Chapter 472. Whoosh. Accompanied by a sharp sound, Noah turned into a stream of light under the push of the magician in the form of Death Feather. He flashed through space and shot toward the endless sea. Noah didn't look behind him, nor did he check if his target was following him. Noah flew forward as fast as he could while in the Death Feather form. At the same time, he activated his sensing ability to scan the surrounding sea surface. Not long after, Noah opened his eyes and looked at a small island in front of him. It was an uninhabited island. If gods like Velaslana and Mechal went all out, sinking an island wouldn't be a difficult task. Although Noah didn't think that the two highest-level gods would go all out against him, other than being provoked by him, they were also each other's opponents. It was too dangerous for two gods to fight head-on. Therefore, Noah used a trick to lure Velaslana and Mechal over. As for the uninhabited island, it was the perfect place to fight with the gods. At that moment, Noah made up his mind. The tip of the magician's wings in the form of death feather spurted out a large amount of black light, making the wings of light bigger and more solid. It pushed Noah and shot toward the uninhabited island. After a while, Noah came to the sky above the uninhabited island. He swooped down and landed heavily on the beach. Bang! The rough landing made a muffled sound on the beach, and sand flew everywhere. Noah, who was standing on the beach, raised his head and looked in front of him. Whoosh! A gust of strong wind appeared out of nowhere and slowly swirled around, turning into the appearance of a 14 or 15-year-old boy. So this is the battlefield you've chosen? The war god, who had never lost a battle, scanned his surroundings with ease. It doesn't look like a trap, but maybe there's something I haven't noticed. Yes, it's an advantageous terrain if it's not discovered by the enemy. If it's discovered, it's just a weakness. Can you give me defeat here? Brat. Before Noah could answer, the sky was suddenly covered by a thick layer of dark clouds. Boom! A deafening clap of thunder rang out, and a bolt of lightning descended from the sky. It landed on the sea beside Noah and Welslana, and while it stirred up huge waves, it slowly turned into a tall giant. Human. War god. The divine king with the crude staff let out a thunderous roar. Making a fool out of me as a king is a crime. You will pay with your lives. Ha 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 ha. As if he was delighted by the upcoming battle, Velslana laughed out loud. Against the warrior who pursues victory and the king of the gods. Interesting. Interesting. I can finally feel my blood boiling. After saying that, Velslana's eyes stared at Noah, and his smile became ferocious because of his excessive enthusiasm for battle. On the battlefield, it's common sense to eliminate the weak in advance. Kid, let's start with you. As soon as the words fell, Velslana turned into a gust of wind and rushed in the direction of Noah. Noah's eyes narrowed, and the light wings behind him shook. His body forcibly twisted, and just as he was about to retreat, the gust of wind surged out in an extremely strange manner. Like an invisible rope, it wrapped around Noah like lightning. Velslana has 10 incarnations. Among them, the incarnation of strong wind can cause tornadoes. The speed of the gust of wind was extremely fast, and it caught up with Noah in the blink of an eye. Like a silkworm cocoon, it wrapped Noah in it. Poof! However, in the next second, a slight sound echoed. In the gust of wind, a figure shot out and rushed out of the range of the gust of wind. Oh! In the rolling gust of wind, Velslana's voice slowly sounded. You are indeed brave and skilled in battle. If this was in ancient times, I would have bestowed you with divine protection and allowed you to enter the battlefield for my constant victories. Now, continue to display your martial prowess in front of me. Suddenly, the gust of wind quickly rose into the air and swept straight in the direction of Noah. Hearing the sound of the wind coming from below, Noah hurriedly lowered his head, and immediately his expression changed. The light wings behind him flapped, and his figure quickly retreated. Although temporarily retreating for victory is not a cowardly act, blindly retreating is too boring. Human, don't let me down. The speed of the gust of wind immediately increased again, and in the blink of an eye, it blew in front of Noah. Looking at the approaching gust of wind, Noah remained silent and just flapped his wings to escape. In the sky above the beach of the uninhabited island, a figure and a gust of wind were chasing each other, and the distance between the two was rapidly closing. At this time, the anger in the heart of another god had reached its limit. Human. Military god. You dare to ignore me, a king? Mekar angrily attacked. Whoosh. The stick in his hand seemed to turn into an illusory flash of lightning, and Mekar swung it out like a windmill. With the momentum of Mount Tai, in the midst of the heavy explosion, it brought a sharp force that made Noah's skin prickle, and smashed down on Noah's body. Although Mekar's body was huge, his speed was as fast as lightning. By the time Noah noticed the attack, the gigantic cudgel that seemed to blot out the sky was already less than half a meter away from him. Wang! Just as Mecker's attack was about to land on Noah's body, Noah's bandaged arms suddenly burst with a bright golden light. Roar! Amidst a resounding roar that seemed to come from ancient memories, a golden beast shot out from the golden light. Like a meteor, it viciously slammed into the descending cudgel. Dong! The terrifying sound of the collision shook the air, causing a burst of sharp explosions, and caused a violent shock wave. Suddenly, Mecker's stick was forcibly pushed back, and the golden beast was like a rubber ball that had been slapped away, rapidly falling to the ground. This sudden turn of events caused Welslana and Mecker, who had turned into a gust of wind to chase after Noah, to stop and look down. Over there, the golden wolf, whose beautiful fur fluttered in the wind. Her entire body seemed to be surrounded by golden light as she stood there with an indomitable spirit. Her entire body reflected the golden light, and at a glance, she was extremely beautiful and noble. The golden wolf was naturally Bio, who had been sleeping in Noah's body all this time. Facing the two gods of disobedience, Noah was not arrogant enough to think that he could deal with them alone. So when Mecker joined the battle, Noah did not hesitate to release Bio. Bio's appearance surprised both Welslana and Mecker. A divine beast. It doesn't seem to be one. To be able to block the attack of the divine king, its power has already surpassed that of a divine beast. Welslana's surprised voice sounded from the gust of wind. A beast that isn't a divine beast actually has that kind of power? Mecker, who had used the identity of Baal to kill the dragon king Yamu, could see that Bio was not simple, but he still spoke angrily. Do you want to challenge me, the dragon hunter? Roar! Bio raised his emerald eyes and stared at the tall giant. With a long roar, his body suddenly shone with golden light. As the golden light bloomed, Bio's body was like an inflated balloon, rapidly expanding. Originally, he was only half the size of a human, but in a moment, he had become a monster that was even bigger than Mecker. As his body grew larger, a vigorous golden light slowly overflowed from Bio's body, causing the space around Bio to ripple like water. Welslana was surprised at first, but then he smiled happily. Like me, you have the ability to change your body at will? Bio was a fantasy breed that was born from miracles, fantasies, and mysteries. Its form was not fixed, so it could indeed change into various forms like Welslana. Roar! After transforming into a gigantic body, Bio's originally bewitching gem-like beast eyes finally had some of the ferocity that originally belonged to him. He opened his gigantic mouth and with a resounding roar, he pounced towards the similarly gigantic Mecker. Bio was a true immortal. It definitely wouldn't be a problem for him to entangle Mecker. Chapter 473. Looking at Bio, who was rushing towards Meckel, Noah's wings of light flapped behind him. After retreating a distance, he let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there was still Bio. Otherwise, no matter how confident Noah was, he wouldn't dare to say that he could kill one of the gods in a battle between two of the highest-level gods. On the shore of the uninhabited island, the huge man and beast finally collided. Ha! With a roar, Mecker raised his hand and swung the huge stick in his hand. It cut through the void, leaving a long afterimage in the space. Roar! The moment Meckel made his move, Bio also suddenly raised his head and let out a loud and resounding roar. His huge body directly collided with Meckel. After a moment, under Noah's gaze, the man and beast collided with a loud bang. Dong! At the moment of collision, a thunderous explosion resounded through the sky. As soon as he came into contact with Bio, Mecker adopted his most ferocious close combat style. The pair of rods in his hands were as thick as mountains, and as he waved them around, they brought about a series of sharp sounds as they broke through the air. Gales and flashes of lightning appeared as he continuously attacked Bio. Although Bio's body had become bigger, his speed hadn't decreased at all. Instead, it gave him an extremely large amount of power. As he collided with Meckel, his terrifying power seemed to break through the void. He rushed towards Meckel again and again, entangling with Meckel. Suddenly, the entire sea was like boiling water under the collision of the man and beast. It rolled back and forth, causing waves to explode. Lana had returned to the appearance of a teenager. Lana, who had the power to transform into 10 different avatars, now had the appearance of a teenager. Not only was he a human, but he also had the appearance of a 15-year-old teenager. It was one of Lana's 10 avatars, the avatar of a teenager. In order to maintain the order of the chaotic world, in the legends, Lana liked to use the avatar of a teenager when he was fighting against the enemy gods. This was because, among the people and royalty that Lana protected, this avatar was the symbol of a hero. Under this incarnation, Lana could obtain the power of protection and domination. Thus, when the huge waves stirred up by the fierce battle between Mekr and Bo surged in his direction, Lana shouted softly, "Back off." The word spirit of blessing and domination was the incarnation of the hero, the power of the youth. Therefore, under this order, when the rolling waves surged in front of Lana, they suddenly separated on their own. It was as if there was an invisible barrier separating the seawater, so that the space within 2 meters of Lana was like a vacuum, not being submerged by the seawater. "So you have such a guardian beast?" Lana looked strangely at Bo, who was entangled with Mekr. It seemed that the fight between Bo and Mekr had ignited his desire to fight. He looked at Noah with burning eyes. "Then, should we begin?" Hearing this, Noah, who was floating in the air, silently lowered his body and pointed the knight's sword at Lana. "Unlike Bo, I don't have the ability to transform. Let me use the sword in my hand to challenge you, the god of victory." "Sword?" Lana suddenly smiled. "Although I, who have 10 incarnations, rely on the power of transformation to be able to grasp victory in any battle, but no matter what, I once had the title of a hero. As the god of war, and the protector of the people, if you challenge me with a sword, how can I not show you my skills?" After saying that, Lana reached out his hand, as if he was holding something, and stretched it straight to his side. "Sword. Come to my hand." Under the word spirit of domination, on the beach, a burst of sand suddenly rose up, and gradually condensed into a sand sword in Lana's hand. Holding the sand sword in his hand, an extremely domineering aura suddenly erupted from Lana's body. This aura was so strong that it made Noah feel a little suffocated. With the huge amount of curse power that belonged to God gushing out from Lana's body, the sand sword made of sand seemed to become more solid. It also burst out like a flash of cold light on the edge of the sword, which made Noah's heart tighten. Although he didn't directly face the sand sword, Noah didn't doubt that even if his knight's sword hit it with full force, there wouldn't be a single crack on the sand sword. Under the support of the word spirit of domination and the huge amount of curse power from Lana's incarnation, the sand sword became a true divine weapon in the sense of the word. This kind of skill could be called a divine skill. Sure enough, this was something that only God could do. No need to be polite. Lana calmly smiled. "Show your bravery in front of me." Hearing this, the magic power that flowed in Noah's body like a surging lake also rolled up, making Noah's arm tremble. The knight's sword, in his hand, pointed diagonally to the ground, and an extremely huge amount of magic power lingered on it, bringing an invisible hot wind, causing the air around the sword to fluctuate. Then, looking up slowly, looking at Lana, who was also possessed by the curse power, Noah's eyes flashed. "I won't be polite." After saying that, Noah's figure instantly turned into a blurry black shadow, and the faint sound of the engine driving echoed from the death feather form magician behind Noah, allowing Noah to charge forward with an imposing manner towards the motionless Lana. During the burst, a magic line like electric wires spread out from Noah's body, covering Noah's hand, and also covered the knight's sword and the death feather form of a magician, bringing a wave of fluctuation. That was enhanced magic. With the enhanced magic strengthening, Noah's arm strength would increase, the knight's sword would also become sharper, and the death feather form of a magician would burst out with more ferocious speed, directly increasing Noah's strength, slash, and speed. In addition to the rune of knight's sword and magician strengthening, Noah's slash and speed increased several times. The knight's sword, in his hand, cut through the air like a flash of black lightning, carrying a fierce wind that caused the space to fluctuate, and fiercely chopped down at the motionless Welslana in front of him. The strength of the force was so strong that even the air under the sword was expelled, bringing a low sonic boom that lingered in the ears. The strong wind pressure made the ancient Roman-like clothes on Welslana's body tightly stick to his skin, but the sculpture-like artistic face was not moved by the fierce knight's sword in the slightest. Looking at the knight's sword, that was getting closer and closer, when the knight's sword was only half a meter away from his head, Welslana's feet moved very casually and gently. Swish! The pitch-black knight's sword suddenly fell and brushed past Welslana's shoulder. At this moment, Welslana suddenly raised the sand sword surrounded by a huge spell, slightly bent it, and suddenly stabbed in the direction of the knight's sword. Ding! The seemingly random sand sword accurately touched the knight's sword at the moment when it brushed past Welslana's shoulder. Clang! A powerful force burst out from the sand sword, and the knight's sword was pushed up, making Noah, who was holding the sword, exposed a big gap, and even his body lost its balance. Not bad. Welslana smiled calmly. His hand that was holding the sword slightly bent, and he lifted the sand sword that was surrounded by a huge amount of cursed power. His arm shook, and the sand sword brought along a cold wind as it mercilessly pierced towards Noah's chest. But, it's still not enough to challenge a god. Noah suddenly reacted in an instant. The light wings on his back suddenly shook, making Noah's body that lost its balance turn half a circle. Holding the knight's sword tightly, the surging magic quickly condensed on the sword, and fiercely slashed out. Just in time, it collided with the sand sword that was thrusting violently. Clang! The pitch-black knight's sword and the sand sword suddenly collided fiercely, and a crisp sound of weapons clashing suddenly sounded at the point of contact, stirring up ripples that caused the atmosphere to fluctuate. Chapter 474. Clank. The collision between the knight's sword and the sand sword made a loud sound of weapons clashing reverberate in all directions like an echo, and it even caused a burst of sparks to fly in all directions. Under the push of the light wings behind him, Noah quickly retreated, leaving a series of afterimages in the air. He raised his head and looked at Welslana, who was still as motionless as a mountain, and frowned deeply. Welslana had 10 avatars. The 10 avatars had 10 different abilities, so Welslana could change his form and ability to fight under any circumstances, and lead the battle to his advantage. Just like Elusha, Welslana could use the most advantageous and useful avatars to restrain the enemy under the most suitable circumstances. But until now, other than using the avatar of Strong Wind at the beginning, Welslana had only used the avatar of Young Man to deal with Noah's battle. Even so, in a head-on collision, Welslana's strength still firmly suppressed Noah's. The battle situation was indeed quite unfavorable for Noah. However, Welslana seemed to still be observing Noah until now, as if he wanted to know how far Noah could go if he tried his best. In other words, Welslana was not serious at all. Although he was stimulated by Noah's pursuit of victory and accepted Noah's challenge as the god of victory, Welslana obviously did not treat Noah as a real opponent. He did not use the avatar's power, nor was he serious. It could not be said that Welslana saw through Noah, but Welslana had not made the judgment that he needed to use that level of power, and was just testing Noah's strength. This is good. The more careless you are with me, in the end, the more smoothly my plan can be carried out. Taking a deep breath of the slightly cool air, Noah stared at Welslana, who looked calm, and held the knight's sword in his hand. The magician, in the form of Death Feather, behind Noah's magician, and the rune magic runes lit up at the same time. Pung! The black light gushing out from the tip of the wings suddenly increased, explosively increasing the performance, generating a huge thrust, making Noah's body almost turn into a black line, sticking close to the ground, and exploding in the direction of Welslana. Welslana suddenly raised his eyebrows, and calmly raised the sand sword in his hand, facing Noah, and prepared to give Noah a head-on blow. However, in the next moment, a scene that surprised Welslana happened. Go! Noah's eyes, and the knight in his hands suddenly, and the knight sword suddenly, Noah, Noah. On the body of the Dark Knight sword, the enhance magic pattern and the rune magic rune also lit up. With the help of the enhance magic and the speed rune, the pitch black knight's sword turned into a blurry shadow. It flashed through the air like a bolt of lightning, and with a faint whistling sound, it shot towards Velislana. Noah's sudden throwing attack made Velislana's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise, but his face was still calm. Facing the sharp knight's sword that shot toward him, Velislana did not retreat, but instead, he raised the sand sword in his hand and slashed at the blurry shadow. At this moment, the knight's sword that turned into a blurry shadow suddenly disappeared. As if directly penetrating through space, the black knight's sword disappeared in an instant, and suddenly appeared in the fluctuation of space. However, when it appeared again, the black knight's sword had already arrived in front of Velislana, and it fiercely stabbed toward his chest. This is... Velislana's pupils shrank, and his expression became serious. The extraordinary eyesight belonging to the gods allowed him to see the truth of this phenomenon. Did he shorten the distance? At this time, the sand sword in Velislana's hand had already slashed out, and he could not withdraw it. He did use his brain. The huge spell that was originally lingering on the sand sword instantly rushed to Velislana's other hand, and that hand was covered by a pale golden light. However, you can't defeat me with this kind of trick. After saying that, Velislana suddenly stretched out his hand, and directly grabbed the knight's sword that shot toward him like lightning, and he directly grabbed the sharp blade of the knight's sword. Clang! When the sharp weapon suddenly came into contact with Velislana's hand, it actually caused a crisp sound that was like the sound of weapons colliding with each other. Velislana, who directly held the knight's sword, shook his hand heavily, and the force carried by the sword was dissolved by him, and he easily received Noah's surprise attack. And since Velislana knew that the knight's sword had the ability to control the distance, it meant that the same trick would no longer work. However, Noah was not shocked, but happy, and his eyes completely lit up. Wanton plunder. Black Tea King. When the spell that released the true power of the knight's sword sounded, the knight's sword that was directly held in Velislana's hand shook, and a blue flame burst out like an explosion. Suddenly, Velislana's face changed. Because Velislana felt it. Although the flame on the knight's sword that was burning with blue flames did not bring any heat, the spell that was originally flowing very smoothly in his body suddenly became chaotic, and regardless of Velislana's control, it rolled up. Then, at this moment, Velislana felt that something in his body flowed into the knight's sword, and was absorbed by the knight's sword. Velislana was shocked, and he reflexively let go of the knight's sword in his hand. The knight's sword that was burning with blue flames suddenly disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was already back in Noah's hand. Success! Feeling the power of the knight's sword, Noah fiercely controlled the death feather form of the magician to soar into the sky and shouted. Bio! Bio, who was dealing with Mekar, suddenly flashed his ferocious beast eyes. Roar! It was unknown how many times it had been hit by Mekal's club, but its huge body suddenly turned into a bright meteor. It circled in the air, and before Mekal could react, it fiercely hit Mekal's back. Bang! Along with a muffled sound, Mekar's huge body was directly knocked back, and fell in the direction of the beach. Needless to say, Velislana happened to be there. Velislana, who did not expect this to happen, was shocked, and then his body was buried by Mekar, who was like a heavy mountain. Boom! In the loud sound, Mekar's huge body fell on the beach, and the sand on the beach exploded in all directions like waves. Roar! Bio, who had turned into a meteor, flew above Mekar and transformed back into his golden wolf form. His body swelled up again, becoming a few times bigger. Then, he fiercely landed on the ground, smashing into Mekar's body. Bang! In the muffled sound of the impact, the heavy and powerful limbs suddenly fell on Mekar's body, and the bones in Mekar's body were unable to bear the weight. Damn golden beast! Mecker's angry roar resounded through the sky. At the same time, taking advantage of the moment when Bio restrained Mecker, Noah rushed to the sky, and stopped in the sky above the uninhabited island. His body, like a gust of wind, surged with a huge magic explosion, and swept out like an explosion. Hum! A burst of golden light, more dazzling than the golden wolf Bio's, suddenly rose from Noah's body. In the crisp sound of paw, Noah fiercely closed his palms, and a gorgeous magic array immediately spun out from his closed palms. The magic that turned into a dazzling golden light suddenly surged into the rotating magic array, and the brilliant magic array's hub fiercely lit up. Hum! The space around the uninhabited island shook. Bright pillars of light suddenly rose from all around the uninhabited island, and rushed to the sky, surrounding the entire uninhabited island. Chapter 475. Wang. Along with the sound of space vibrating, a bright beam of light shot up into the sky, surrounding the uninhabited island and releasing a huge amount of magic. Mecker, who was temporarily suppressed by Bio, gripped Bio's neck. The muscles on his huge body bulged, and even his veins began to bulge. With a furious roar, he slowly pushed away Bio, who had used his body to suppress him, who was slowly suppressing him. Whoosh! At the same time, a gust of wind began to blow from behind Mecker's huge body. It passed through Mecker's huge body and drilled its way out. Needless to say, it was Welslana, who had used the strong wind incarnation. Although he was affected by Noah and Bio's surprise attack, Welslana naturally wouldn't die just because of Mecker's attack. It was more likely that he didn't even suffer the slightest bit of damage. However, Noah didn't let Bio suddenly attack to use Mecker to attack Welslana. What Noah wanted to do was to wipe out Welslana and Meckel in one fell swoop. Wang! Rich golden light bloomed from Noah's palms and the beautiful magic formation rotating in front of his palms, illuminating the sky of the uninhabited island. Noah yelled as he mobilized most of the magic power in his body and let it flow into the magic array like a flood that had been opened from a dam. Fairy Sphere. Activate. The pillars of light surrounding the uninhabited island suddenly bloomed with a strong light. In the next instant, with the uninhabited island as the center, the pillars of light that rose into the sky suddenly scattered, turning into a layer of halo, forming a huge bright transparent sphere that surrounded the entire uninhabited island. Taking a closer look, the surface of this huge sphere had the image of a fairy with its wings spread out. What is this? The sudden change made Mecker, who was still wrestling with Bio, stunned. Is this the method you prepared for victory? Welslana, who had turned into a gust of wind and gradually drilled out of Mecker's huge body, let out a joyful shout. But, warrior, unless it's an ancient god-killing spell, spells won't work on us. Ah. I know. Of course I know. Noah, who was floating in the air, suddenly swooped down. Therefore, this fairy sphere is not used to deal with you directly. It is only used to confine everything that happens next within it. Saying this, Noah swooped down in front of the huge sphere and put his hand on it. Fairy Sphere and Fairy Tale were the last super spells of the three great spells, and were known as the Absolute Defense spell. It could condense the thoughts of all the guild members of Fairy Tale into powerful magic and create an invincible protective sphere. It had the ability to protect everything within its effective range, and could even freeze time within the effective range of the magic. This spatial turbulence swept out like a storm, and when it came into contact with the huge sphere, it caused the huge sphere to tremble. Crack, crack. The entire huge sphere also began to crack under the sweeping of the spatial turbulence. Seeing this, Noah's expression changed and a hint of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. He frantically poured the magic in his body into the huge sphere, desperately trying to maintain the existence of the fairy sphere. If it weren't for the huge sphere, Noah would definitely have died once he was swept out by the spatial turbulence. Oh, 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 oh. Ah, ah, ah. Within the range of the huge sphere, in the pitch-black space where everything had been destroyed, Welslana and Mecker let out a loud cry at the same time. Their bodies were directly swept into the turbulent space and dragged into the pitch-black space crack. Should it be said that they were indeed gods in myths? The spatial turbulence that ordinary people would be destroyed with a touch swept over the bodies of these two highest-level gods, but it did not bring them any harm. It only made them unable to control their bodies as they were swept into the depths of the spatial crack. If this continued, even if these two gods did not die, they would be directly exiled into the depths of the infinite space and wander endlessly. But, was it that easy? You want to deal with me, the king of the gods, with this level of power? Mecha roared. Don't be delusional. Human. After saying that, Mecha's huge body directly turned into a bolt of lightning, rushing out against the spatial turbulence. Ha 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 ha. Whales Lana also laughed loudly. This is the power you prepared for victory? A power that can even shatter space is indeed amazing. But this is not enough for me to taste the taste of defeat. After saying that, Whales Lana's body turned into a gust of wind, colliding with the surrounding spatial turbulence and slowly blowing outwards. Seeing that Whales Lana and Mecha were using their magical powers to break through the spatial turbulence and break out, Noah's heart was filled with shock. Can't this deal with them? Should I say, as expected of a god? Chapter 476. Whoosh. Violent spatial turbulence continued to engulf the area of effect of the fairy sphere. Rumble. In the dark world where even space was annihilated, waves of destructive waves rolled back and forth, attacking in all directions. Kacha. Kacha Kacha, the fairy sphere, which was known as an absolute defense spell, was swept away by the spatial turbulence. Along with the sound of cracking, cracks began to appear on the surface of the fairy sphere. In such a situation, a human and two gods began to fight with their lives on the line. Ah! Noah frantically poured the magic in his body into the fairy sphere, maintaining the existence of the fairy sphere so that the spatial turbulence would not affect him. Oh! Mecha, who had transformed into a bolt of lightning, kept rushing out. Against the spatial turbulence that could kill an ordinary person, he let out a furious roar. Ah! Even Whales Lana, who had turned into a gust of wind, seemed to have begun to fight with his life on the line. He carried an extremely terrifying curse power, attacking the surrounding spatial turbulence and attacking outside. In a sense, this human and two gods were challenging their own limits, just to survive in this chaotic battle. Seeing Whales Lana, who had transformed into a gust of wind, and Mecha, who had transformed into a bolt of lightning, unwaveringly attacking this side under the sweeping of the spatial turbulence, Noah's eyes also showed a look of madness. Soon, they would be able to break free from the sweeping of the spatial turbulence and break through the fairy sphere that was riddled with holes in one breath. They would be out of danger, and a look of madness appeared in Noah's eyes. Although directly shattering the space and exiling Whales Lana and Mecha into the spatial turbulence, as long as the plan went smoothly, it should be able to bury any opponent. But if the opponent was a god, Noah had not thought of the possibility of failure. In order to deal with this, Noah had previously prepared another method, which was to let Bo deal with Mecha, while he himself faced Whales Lana. At that moment, Noah fiercely raised the knight's sword in his other hand, and with a stab, the knight's sword pierced through one of the cracks in the fairy sphere. Bang! In the next moment, the surging flames on the knight's sword soared. Release for me. Noah's low voice resounded through the sky. Black Tea King. As soon as the voice fell, the pitch-black knight's sword suddenly turned golden, and even the flames on the sword turned into golden flames, crazily rising. What? Seeing this scene, Whales Lana, who had turned into a gust of wind, was shocked. Could that be? As the god of victory, Whales Lana had 10 incarnations. Strong wind, bull, white horse, camel, mountain boar, boy, phoenix, herding sheep, goat, and finally, human warrior with a golden sword. There were a total of 10 incarnations, and each incarnation had a different power. After learning from Liliana what kind of power Whales Lana's 10 incarnations had, Noah planned to use the Black Tea King to steal the power of one of the incarnations. The most powerful of Whales Lana's 10 incarnations was the white horse. In mythology and ancient times, the existence of the horse had a close relationship with the sun from the beginning. In almost all myths, the sun god who represented the sun sat in a carriage, carried by horses, and traveled from east to west. This was commonly passed down in many civilizations. East, India, Northern Europe, China, Babylon. Without exception. Even the Greek Apollo was like this. Just like Apollo, in Persian mythology, the god of light, Mitra, who represented the light, also praised the same myth. Welslana was the undefeated military god who served Mitra, the incarnation of the sun. Therefore, Welslana, who served Mitra, could transform into a white horse, carry the sun, and drive the flames from the sun. While dealing with Welslana, Noah took advantage of Welslana's carelessness and used the Black Tea King to steal Welslana's incarnation of the white horse. Now, it was time to release the incarnation of the white horse. Burn it all up for me, gods. When Noah burst out such a roar, the expanding golden flames burning on the knight's sword suddenly stagnated, and then suddenly burst out. Nay! A horse's cry echoed in the dark space turbulence. The flames from the sun turned into a majestic white horse shining with golden light. Amidst the horse's neigh, it carried the overwhelming golden flames and fell like a meteor from the sky, rubbing against the spatial turbulence that swept up and abruptly landing on the gale and lightning that were charging outwards. Bang! The surging flames of the sun burst out like an explosion, covering every corner of the space turbulence with a sea of golden flames. The scorching heat caused the space turbulence to become even more violent, and rushed in all directions of the pitch-black world. Ah! The wind that was directly covered by the sun's flames returned to the form when Welslana used the incarnation of the youth, and Mekhl, who turned into lightning, also returned to the tall giant form in the flames. Under the burning of the flames, both of them let out painful screams. If they were in their peak state, then it would not be difficult for Welslana and Mekhl to block the power of the incarnation of Welslana. However, under the sweeping of the space turbulence, Welslana and Mekhl could not protect themselves, and in order to rush out of the space turbulence, they used a lot of curse power, and did not have any power left to block the power of the white horse. Under the burning of the fire from the sun, Welslana and Mekhl's bodies melted like candles. Under such circumstances, the two gods of the highest level actually laughed, and they laughed with extreme pleasure. Have you let my incarnation fail? Welslana no longer made any resistance, and let his body gradually collapse under the sweeping of the sun's flames and space turbulence. His eyes shot straight to Noah, who was outside the huge sphere, and he laughed heartily. How amazing! Warrior! I admit that this is my failure, but there will not be a next time. Mekhl's deafening thunder sounded. King of the gods slayer! You have defeated the king of the gods, Mekhl. Be proud of it. Then, become stronger. Welslana reached out to Noah, his eyes full of undying fighting spirit. Let my power become thy food. Until I appear in front of thee again. Have the power to obtain victory in any battle. Leaving these words, Welslana and Mekhl's figures were buried by the golden flames and dark turbulence, and they disappeared. At the same time, Noah felt two huge forces suddenly flowed into his body, mixed with the almost exhausted magic power in his body, and violently tumbled. The two huge forces that appeared out of nowhere were like overbearing invaders. Not only did they occupy Noah's body, but they also provoked the little remaining magic power in Noah and caused a conflict. Under such a conflict, Noah's knight's sword and revolver, the two weapons in his soul, suddenly disappeared from Noah's body, turned into pure power, and mixed with all the forces in his body, stirring up all the forces in his body. In the end, even Bio, who had returned to Noah's body, turned into pure power and joined the chaotic battle. In other words, all the forces in Noah's body were in conflict, and some kind of change occurred. In the next moment, an unimaginable pain attacked Noah's body. Noah did not even have time to cry out in pain. His consciousness shook under the impact of the unimaginable pain, and began to dissipate. Because the revolver also turned into pure power and joined Noah's body in the chaotic battle, the death feather, form of a magician, behind Noah naturally disappeared, and let the suspended Noah fall to the sea. The moment before he completely lost consciousness, Noah felt it. Two soft and delicate bodies wrapped around him. Chapter 477. In a daze, Noah felt that there was a slender palm stroking back and forth on his body, as if it was very curious about his body. This feeling did not bring any unpleasantness to Noah. Because the palm was very slender, and the touch was very good, so no one would doubt that the owner of the palm was a man. In other words, the palm that was curiously stroking back and forth on Noah's body was a woman's hand. Under this feeling, Noah's consciousness gradually recovered, and he opened his eyes. "Oh. You're awake?" This was a very light, crisp and sweet voice. The moment the voice sounded, Noah also opened his eyes, and then, a delicate girl's pretty face was imprinted into Noah's eyes. "Good morning." The human world seems to use this way to greet people who have just woken up. The girl said with a sweet smile. "So, child, I can also greet you like this, right?" Noah finally reacted when he heard this. His eyes widened as he looked at the pretty face that was just inches away from him. Immediately, he abruptly leaped up and distanced himself from the young lady. Only then did Noah realize that he was in a space that he didn't know where it was. There was nothing around, everything in sight was gray, even to the end of the horizon, except for gray, there was nothing else. The only exception was Noah himself, and the girl who just knelt beside Noah lying on the ground. Judging from her appearance, she was at most a 14 or 15-year-old girl. The girl had an extremely upright and cute appearance. Her figure was extremely slender, and she looked very young and tender. However, she had a very seductive temperament that made people feel that she had a seductive temperament. Unconsciously, they were immersed in this feeling. Therefore, rather than using the word beautiful to describe this girl, it was better to say that she had a young face and body, long golden hair, and wearing a thin white dress. The girl was really quite cute. Noah had never seen this girl before. Therefore, Noah was sure that he did not know this person at all. Why did he appear here? Who was this girl? One question after another made Noah speak hesitantly. "You are Pandora." The girl replied in a cute tone that could have been added to the end of the sentence. "The goddess who gives all disasters and a glimmer of hope, that's me." Pandora? Noah was stunned. He pointed at the girl who called herself Pandora with a dumbfounded expression. "Are you Pandora?" It was impossible for Noah not to have heard of the name Pandora. It would not be an exaggeration to use the word most famous to describe the goddess. However, undoubtedly, this goddess was the most charming and beautiful in the myths. Although this young lady who called herself Pandora also had an indescribable charm, her figure and appearance didn't seem like the goddess of calamity at all. Pandora suddenly blinked and stared at Noah. "I feel like you're thinking about something very rude." Noah was shocked and quickly laughed dryly. "No, how could it be? What a naughty child." Pandora puffed up her cheeks. She looked so cute that it completely destroyed the image of the goddess Pandora in Noah's heart. "You can't be so rude to your mother." Mother? Noah's mouth twitched. Pandora was the third person who claimed to be Noah's mother. The first two, Gaia and Alea, looked like they were only 10 years old. Not to mention being a mother, they might even be suitable to be Noah's daughter. Now, this person in front of him, who looked younger than him, claimed to be his mother. At this moment, Noah cursed his birth from the bottom of his heart. "I feel like you're thinking about something rude again." Pandora angrily stared at Noah. "I'm the goddess who manages the reincarnation ceremony of the god slayer. Since you've reincarnated as a god slayer, you're my child, and I'm your mother. Is there anything wrong with that?" God slayer? Noah was shocked. He finally remembered everything that happened before he fainted. "Yes. I killed whales Lana and Mekkel. I saw that battle too. It was very exciting. Pandora's anger turned into joy. She was like a child. She got angry quickly, but her anger disappeared quickly. Among all my children, you performed the best in the battle of reincarnating as a god slayer. Even I didn't think that you would actually shatter the space, and banish the invincible god of war and the god king into the space turbulence. Finally, you gave them a fatal blow and killed two gods at the same time. This has never happened before. It made me want to get out of here and give you a big hug as a reward. With that, Pandora got up, rushed forward, and hugged Noah, who was stunned there. You're Noah, right? You did very well. Noah awkwardly hugged Pandora, who couldn't even touch the ground after hugging his neck because of her height. After a while, he sighed. In other words, I've really become a god slayer? Of course it's true. Pandora raised her head from Noah's arms and suddenly smiled. With the reincarnation spell left behind by Epimetheus and myself, and with the gods as the sacrifice, I have indeed transferred the power of the Welslana war god and the god king Mecher to you through a secret ritual, making you the new god slayer. After saying that, Pandora narrowed her eyes, and her expression became a little flirtatious. Faintly, whether it was her eyes or her expression, there was an extremely strong curiosity. However, your physique seems to be a little special. Hearing this, Noah was stunned. Do you know? Pandora let go of her arms around Noah's neck and landed on the ground. She raised her head and looked at Noah with an extremely strong curiosity in her eyes. Under normal circumstances, using the secret ritual of reincarnation and using the killed gods as sacrifices, the god slayer can only obtain one god's authority. However, when the secret ritual transferred the power of Welslana and Mechel into your body actually absorbed all the power of the two gods and mixed it with your own power, resulting in a great change. Noah was stunned at first, and then he was speechless. If such a thing really happened, then it was indeed Noah's physique that caused trouble. Although Noah was a human, he had the three physiques that even gods could not have. One of the three physiques was that he could absorb all the external power that entered his body for his own use, strengthening himself and increasing Noah's power. It was because of this physique that Noah could absorb all the power of Welslana and Mechel for himself. However, what was that great change about? Could it be that it was the same as when he implanted the daybreak star pattern in the world of the absolute dual blades? The power that entered his body and his physique had a strange conflict, causing his own power to change? To be able to kill two gods at the same time, even if it is inconceivable, it is not absolutely impossible. However, to be able to absorb all the power of the reincarnated gods through the secret ritual is something that I have never encountered before. Pandora moved her head closer to Noah's face. Are you hiding something? You can't lie to your mother. Looking at Pandora's extremely curious expression, as if she wanted to dissect him, Noah could only turn his head away and avoid her gaze. You are such a naughty child. Pandora's cheeks puffed up, but after a while, it returned to a cute smile. Forget it. Although I don't know what kind of changes the power of the god of war and Mechel have caused in your body, it must be good for you, right? Hearing this, Noah was about to nod, but his head suddenly felt dizzy, and his vision blurred. Looks like it's time. Pandora said with a smile. Originally, you should have forgotten everything that happened here when you returned to your original world, but I don't know why this world actually accepted your existence. After you return, you shouldn't forget anything, so don't forget your mother. As soon as her voice fell, Noah's vision turned black, and he lost consciousness. Chapter 478. When Noah woke up again, a slightly familiar ceiling appeared in front of him. After sitting up, Noah found that he was lying on a bed and surrounded by the layout of a rather familiar room. If he remembered correctly, this room should be Noah's hotel room in Sardinia. Recalling the feeling of being hugged by two soft and delicate bodies before he fainted, Noah's expression slowly relaxed. Erica and Liliana? Other than Erica and Liliana, it should be impossible for anyone else to save Noah. This made Noah feel some gratitude toward Erica and Liliana. After all, if Electra and Liliana hadn't saved Noah, he would have either fallen into the sea and drowned, or he would have been swept into the spatial turbulence that broke through the fairy sphere and died without a doubt. Thinking of all the arrangements and plans he had made for that battle but almost died in the end, Noah could not help but sigh. Sure enough, killing a god is not something humans can do. With that said, Noah clearly felt that his body seemed to be different from before. Pandora said that when the power of Welslana and Mekar entered Noah's body, the power in Noah's body seemed to have undergone a great change. Thinking of this, Noah frowned, closed his eyes, and sank his consciousness into his body. Then, Noah discovered the changes in his body. First of all, Noah's bones now became harder than iron, perhaps harder than any alloy in the world. Secondly, rather than saying that the muscle fibers in Noah's body had hardened, it was better to say that they had become more difficult to tear. Coupled with the physique of a god slayer that he had learned from others, Noah had no doubt that once he entered a combat state, his body would instantly burst forth with a more powerful ability than adrenaline, allowing his body to enter the most perfect combat state and exert his greatest strength. Of course, the most significant change in Noah's body was that from today onwards, except for spells that were effective against gods, all other magic and magic would be completely ineffective against him, whether it was beneficial or not. This was a physical change. Furthermore, Noah felt that his strength had also undergone a significant change. The most intuitive manifestation was that Noah's originally extremely huge magic power had increased exponentially, at least 3 times. As for the others, such as the 2 weapons lodging in Noah's soul, some of the power that Noah could have used, and even the golden wolf bio, all disappeared. No. It did not disappear. Instead, it completely fused with a power sleeping in Noah's body. It was a power called authority. The power in Noah's body that originally belonged to Welslana, Mekal, and a part of his own power had all fused together, forming an authority. Like Welslana, it could change into 10 avatars of authority. However, due to the fusion of Mekal and Noah's own power, these 10 avatars had also changed. Sensing this change, Noah sent his consciousness, which had sunk into his body, deeper. Immediately, he saw an ancient stone plate. Around the stone plate, there were 10 patterns connected. That was the new authority that was born after the fusion of Noah, Welslana, and Mekal's power. Sinking his consciousness into the stone plate, a large amount of memories poured into Noah's mind, allowing Noah to instantly obtain the information of the 10 avatars. Storm, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welslana's strong wind avatar and Mekal's storm. It could cause a strong storm, and to a certain extent, it could dominate the sky and summon a storm. Giant, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welslana's bull avatar and Mekal's appearance. When using this avatar, one could obtain a strange power that far exceeded the limits, and its power was enough to split mountains and rivers. White horse, an avatar from Welslana, able to summon the white horse that carried the sun and exorcise the flames from the sun. Dragon Man, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welslana's camel avatar and Mekal's dragon slayer avatar. When using this avatar, not only could one obtain a close combat ability that surpassed wild instincts and intuition, but could also transform one's body into a dragon's physique, obtaining a body that was comparable to a giant dragon's. To a certain extent, it could restrain dragon-type creatures and cause great damage to dragon-type creatures. Golden Wolf, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welslana's mountain boar avatar and the crush magic. It could summon the Golden Wolf bio. Under this avatar, the Golden Wolf bio not only had his own original transformation ability, but also had the powerful charging ability of the mountain boar avatar. It could create a shockwave that could crush everything. When using this avatar, the user could also obtain the ability to crush everything. Priest, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welslana's youth avatar and Noah's rune magic. When using this avatar, one could obtain the ability to protect and dominate, shelter and make humans obey. Only when using this avatar, the user could use the rune magic. Combined with the authority itself, not only did the rune magic increase the power of the rune magic, but it also became independent. It no longer needed to be in contact with the magic base to use magic of the authority level. Phoenix, an authority that came from Welslana, able to obtain speed that surpassed everything. Elf, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welslana's shepherd avatar and Noah's regenerative ability strengthened by the protozoan virus. No matter how serious the injury was, as long as it caused damage to the body, it could be expelled in a very short period of time, allowing the user to recover to their original state. Thunder, an avatar formed by combining Welslana's goat avatar and Mechal's lightning authority. It could summon thunderclouds that formed lightning, and it could also turn the user into lightning, gaining the ability to control lightning. Warrior, an avatar from Welslana, a fusion of Noah's knight's sword and revolver. When the avatar has sufficient knowledge of the opponent, the avatar can weave spirits and form a golden sword to attack. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. In addition, Mechal seemed to have other powers, but those powers were too complex, so they were all directly turned into pure curse power, which was used to enhance Noah's magic. To put it bluntly, Noah's current magic, curse power, was definitely stronger than other god slayers. And a lot stronger. As for the 10 avatars' powers, although strictly speaking, it could only be regarded as one power, it could be used as 10 powers. Originally, this kind of power that could use multiple powers must have very strict restrictions, but these restrictions seem to have been eliminated because Noah had absorbed all the powers of Welslana and Mechal. Including the ability to limit, it had been completely integrated into Noah's power. When Noah did not use his power, he could enter a state of self-enhancement. Simply put, Noah's power had been redistributed. Now, without using power, Noah could only use magic bullet, strengthening magic, and the 3 major spells. The rest could only be used after using the corresponding power. For example, crush. Even if Noah still knew how to use it, there was no way to use it without using the avatar of the golden wolf. Because it had already broken away from the category of magic, it had become an ability of power. All these changes made Noah's frown deeper and deeper. Overall, my strength must have increased greatly, but there are pros and cons. It seems that I have to use some time to explore new powers. Chapter 479. After fully understanding the changes in all aspects of his body, Noah opened his eyes, looked at his hands, and smiled bitterly. Although it's not the first time, my physique is really cheating. Pandora said that generally, when a godslayer worked hard to kill a god, they could only get one authority. Noah killed Welslana and Mechal at the same time. Logically speaking, he should have been able to get 2 authorities, but because of the inexplicable changes in his physique and strength and the power of God that flowed into his body, Noah finally only got 1 authority. Storm, Giant, White Horse, Draconian, Golden Wolf, Priest, Phoenix, Elf, Thunder, and Warrior. What Noah got was the authority to use these 10 avatars. The authority that could use multiple powers generally had strict restrictions. For example, an avatar could only be used once, and after using it, it had to wait for a period of time before it could be used again. It was even possible that there was a limit to how long the avatar could be used. However, because of his physique, Noah absorbed all the power of Welslana and Mechal and merged it with his own power, eliminating all these restrictions. If one thought about it carefully, this was not strange at all. After all, Welslana also had the authority to use 10 avatars, and Noah himself did not have these restrictions. If Noah was just an ordinary god slayer, then usurping the power of God would inevitably cause these powers to have restrictions. But Noah's physique tyrannically absorbed these powers and turned the power of God into his own power. Naturally, there would not be any strange restrictions. Therefore, although it was still authority, the authority of the 10 avatars that were born from the combination of Noah, Lana, and Mechal's power was no longer the power of God, but Noah's own power. Without those restrictions, the authority of these 10 avatars could be used as 10 authority. No wonder Noah said that this was cheating. However, no matter what, it was a fact that his own power had increased exponentially to a different dimension, and Noah could not be satisfied with this. Noah closed his eyes again, and the outline of the stone plate that connected the 10 avatars appeared in his mind. He clearly understood how strong these 10 avatars were, and his heart was excited. With my current power, if I face Hades again, I will definitely not lose. Noah opened his eyes and raised his hand. A wave of magic lines immediately fluctuated and covered Noah's arm. Even if it's not fused with authority like the Runi magic, my magic bullet and enhanced magic don't have to come into contact with the magic base plate anymore. I can use them completely on my own. This was an extremely good thing. As mentioned before, the power of magic depended on the power in the source. It was a power that had been determined from the beginning. The amount of this power that a magician could use had long been determined. In other words, no matter how much one honed their magic, as long as they reached the limit of the power that had been determined in the source, then no matter how hard the magician tried, there was no way to improve the power of magic. Now, Noah's magic was completely independent. Like the power of Lana and Mechal that flowed into Noah's body, it had become Noah's own power. It no longer had to be in contact with the magic base, nor was it a power that came from the source. Noah could rely on his own practice to improve the power of his magic, just like the crush magic that he had mastered. And with Noah's magic power that had become even more cheating after becoming a god slayer, why would he worry about the power of his magic not increasing? In addition to magic and magic, my authority is the embodiment of my true power. I must familiarize myself with authority during this period of time. Just after Noah figured out the various changes in himself and the path he should take in the future, the door of Noah's room was opened. Immediately afterward, Erica, who was wearing a black and red princess dress, and Liliana, who was still wearing blue and black casual clothes, came in from the outside. Perhaps they didn't expect Noah to have woken up. When they saw Noah sitting on the bed, Erica and Liliana were startled at first, then they were surprised at the same time. "You're awake?" "I just woke up." Noah also reacted and nodded to Erica and Liliana. "It was you who saved me, right?" "Thank you." Electra and Liliana nodded subconsciously. In the next second, the two girls finally remembered. The man in front of them was no longer just a powerhouse who could block the King of Swords of Italy, but a real god slayer. The 7th god slayer in the world had been born. And he was right in front of Erica and Liliana. At that moment, Liliana, who was the first to realize this, suddenly knelt on one knee on the ground, put her right hand on her left chest, and performed the highest knight's salute to Noah. "Please allow Liliana Kranikar to greet you, Your Majesty." As she said that, Liliana glanced at Erica, who was still standing there without any intention of saluting, and frowned slightly. "Erica, don't tell me you're still as willful and reckless as before when you meet the king." "How strict?" "No matter what, I won't go to that extent. Besides, I'm not being willful and reckless. Knowing how to pay attention to beauty is what a noble lady should have, Lily." Erica shook her head with a wry smile, but still, like Liliana, she knelt on one knee and performed the knight's salute. "Erica Brantery is also here to offer you the highest salute and congratulations, the 7th king." Seeing that even Erica, who was extremely confident in herself and overly concerned about beauty, knelt and saluted him, Noah opened his mouth slightly. But after a moment of hesitation, he finally chose to accept Erica's and Liliana's submission. Erica and Liliana, who thought that Noah would object to their excessive salute because he was not used to it, were surprised at first. Then, they developed a faint admiration for Noah. Why did the relevant people in the magic world treat the God Slayers as kings and serve them? It was not only because the God Slayers had the power that humans could not resist, but also because the God Slayers were the only existences that could fight against the God of disobedience, who was wreaking havoc all over the world. This was because the God Slayer represented the human race in challenging the God of disobedience and was able to protect the human race from the hands of the God of disobedience. Therefore, the human race would respect the God Slayer as their king and also serve the God Slayer voluntarily. As a newly born king, he would subconsciously resist being saluted as a subject, but Noah did not resist. Instead, he accepted it. It was not because Noah really regarded himself as the king of all humans after becoming a God Slayer, but because Noah clearly knew that this identity not only represented status, but also responsibility. Therefore, Noah did not refuse Erica's and Liliana's salute as a subject, which was a tacit admission that he would bear the responsibility of fighting the God of disobedience and protecting humans from the God of disobedience. Seeing this clearly, Erica and Liliana admired Noah. "How long have I been unconscious?" Noah asked. "You should be the ones who brought me back, right?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Liliana replied respectfully. "You have been unconscious for 3 whole days." "Has it been 3 days?" Noah rubbed his eyebrows and sighed. "I'm sorry for letting you take care of me for so long." "No, this is the duty of a knight." Although Erica saluted as a subject, the smile on her face was still as fierce as a female lion's. "Of course, we've also reported the entire process of our king's battle against the undefeated war god and the god of the Mediterranean Sea to the magic society we belong to. Salba Lei Ching has already received the news and specially instructed us to contact him immediately after you wake up." "That idiot?" Noah sighed again. "Knowing that I succeeded in killing the god, that battle maniac should be unable to hold back anymore, right?" With such a sentence, the corners of Noah's mouth gradually curled up. "Well, it's time to get back the capital and interest." Chapter 480. Yo! Noah! I've heard about it. I didn't expect you to fight 2 of the highest level gods before you even became one of my kind. You're so lucky. On the other side of the phone, Tony's frivolous and somewhat excited voice reverberated loudly in Noah's ears, causing Noah to involuntarily move the phone a certain distance away. Noah narrowed his eyes and said to Tony on the other end of the phone in an extremely annoyed tone. "Under normal circumstances, this kind of situation should be said to be bad luck, right? You're at it again. Why are you being so polite?" Tony seemed to be a little excited. To be able to fight 2 of the highest level gods at once, that kind of thing is something that can't be asked for. If it were me, I would be so excited that I wouldn't be able to sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. "You said it was you." "Sorry, I'm definitely not the same as you in this regard," Noah retorted without holding back. "Also, if this kind of situation happened after becoming a god slayer, it would be fine. But I met those 2 before I became a god slayer. If it weren't for my good luck, I would have died a long time ago. To be able to successfully kill a god and become a god slayer, it was basically luck." Noah didn't know how many times he had heard this sentence in the past few days since he came to this world. But when Noah really killed a god and recalled the whole process, he finally understood how accurate this sentence was. For example, Noah was able to successfully use the Black Tea King to steal Welislana's white horse because of Welislana's carelessness, underestimation, and luck. Another example was that he was able to perfectly buy the time to activate the fairy sphere. It was also because Mekl did not want to be outdone and wrestled with Bio. He even pressed Welislana under him. Otherwise, Mekl could have turned into lightning and escaped Bio's control. Then, under the attack of the spatial turbulence, the fairy sphere was able to survive and protect Noah from being affected by the spatial turbulence. At the same time, luck played a part in it. In the end, if Erica and Liliana hadn't arrived at the scene in time, Noah would have fallen into the sea and drowned. Wasn't this luck? With all these factors added together, Noah was finally able to kill two of the highest-level gods at the same time. Although Noah's own strength and planning played a key role in this, the element of luck couldn't be ignored. Now that he thought about it, Noah felt like he was being watched over by the world. Tony must have felt it, but his tone was still indifferent. But you still succeeded in the end. It's fine as long as you succeed. Tony's voice on the other end of the phone became a little more excited. Then, you successfully obtained authority, and two at that, right? Hearing that, Noah really wanted to tell Tony that he had only obtained one authority, the 10 avatars. However, he could use them as 10 authorities to give this idiot a good beating. But on second thought, if Noah were to really reveal this information, not only would he not be able to explain how he obtained such a cheat-like authority, but if the target was Tony, that battle maniac, he would definitely not be affected. Instead, he would be even happier, right? Do you want to know? Noah gave such an answer. Then why don't you come and try? You're right. Tony's voice became more cheerful. Then I'll wait here for you. Don't let me wait too long. After saying that, Tony hung up the phone, causing a busy tone to come from Noah's phone. That idiot. Noah pursed his lips and passed the phone to Liliana, who was standing beside him. Thank you. Liliana took the phone in silence. Her red lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something. However, Erica beat her to it. Forgive me for being blunt, Your Majesty. Erica looked straight at Noah. Do you really intend to fight Sarbatriking? Looking at Erica's thoughtful eyes, Noah shrugged as if he had seen through what Erica was thinking. I can't help it. After all, we agreed on this beforehand, didn't we? This isn't a wise decision. Liliana took a step forward and looked at Noah with a serious expression. You're the king of God's layers. You should consider the people around you. I think a battle between two kings of God's layers will bring great harm to the people around you. I implore you to reconsider, Your Majesty. On the side, although Erica didn't say anything more, it was obvious that she had the same concerns as Liliana. Otherwise, she wouldn't have asked such a question. Both Erica and Liliana knew that Noah and Tony had an agreement to fight after Noah became a Godslayer. However, Erica and Liliana didn't take it seriously before. Was it that easy to become a Godslayer? Compared to Noah successfully killing a god, Erica and Liliana were more inclined to believe that Noah would fail to challenge a god. What they considered was how to deal with the aftermath of Noah's failure, how to deal with the battle between the two gods of disobedience, and how to persuade Tony to rush over. In the end, Noah really succeeded in killing a god and became a Godslayer. Naturally, he had to fulfill his agreement with Tony. In this regard, Erica and Liliana, who had spent all their energy thinking about what to do after Noah's failure, had no way to deal with this result. But there was no doubt that if the battle between the two gods of disobedience had the ability to sink an island, then the result of the battle between the two gods' layers, even if it was inferior to the former, would still bring about losses that others didn't want to see. Erica and Liliana naturally had to find a way to stop it. At the very least, they had to minimize the losses caused by the battle between the two kings of disobedience. Don't worry. Noah waved his hand casually. I'm not stupid enough to start a battle of that level in a place where there are people. No, it's not a matter of whether there are people or not. The loss of buildings is also a loss. Erica and Liliana wanted to say this, but because Noah had fully considered the safety of others, it would be really overboard to ask a king of disobedience for some buildings. Erica and Liliana could only swallow this bitter fruit, and they were already prepared to let the Italian Magic Association bear this loss. Sure enough, the Gods' Layers were a group of troublemakers. Fortunately, in the battle with Welslana and Meckel, Noah did not suffer any injuries. The reason why he was unconscious for 3 days was entirely due to the changes caused by the conflict between the reincarnation of a God-Slayer and the power in his body. Therefore, after waking up, Noah not only did not feel any discomfort in his body, but he also felt quite energetic because of his reincarnation as a God-Slayer. It was as if he was ready to fight anytime and anywhere. In this way, Noah naturally had no reason to continue to stay in bed. Accompanied by Erica and Liliana, he left Sardinia that day and arrived in Rome when it was almost dark. Noah wanted to head straight to the hotel where Tony was staying, but almost as soon as he exited the airport, Erica and Liliana called out to him as though they knew it was the right time. "Wait a minute, Your Majesty," Liliana said. "Before meeting you, there is a lord who wants to see you first." Noah suddenly stopped in his tracks. Erica looked at Noah and smiled unhurriedly. "You should have heard of the Sage Council, right?" The full name of the Sage Council was the Sage Council of Greenwich. Noah heard from Andre that this council seemed to collect information about the God-slayers from all over the world and study the power of the God-slayer. They would also name the power of the God-slayer. To put it simply, rather than calling it an organization, it was more like an intelligence center and research facility that specialized in collecting information. However, the objects of the intelligence and research of this Sage Council were not ordinary people, but focused on the God-slayers and the god of disobedience. Since Erica mentioned the Sage Council, most of the people who wanted to see Noah were from the Sage Council. When Noah thought of this, Erica also confirmed Noah's guess. "The former president of the council wants to see you." Chapter 481. The Sage Parliament of Greenwich was different from the Copper and Black Cross and the Bronze and Black Cross. It was not a magic society. At its most extreme, the Sage Parliament was just like a mutual aid society. In the beginning, the Wise Men's Council was just a simple group of members who exchanged knowledge of the occult. If there was a member who had reached a bottleneck in their research, the rest of the members would also lend a helping hand in terms of economics, academics, and so on. Later on, the Wise Men's Parliament set up many independent research institutions one after another. They also set up educational institutions called academies, gaining great authority and creating the unique nature of the Wise Men's Parliament. However, the purpose of the Sage Parliament's existence was not really to study the occult of this world, but to survive. The Sage Parliament was set up in the 19th century during the Victorian era in England. At that time, the most senior of the deicide, who had lived the longest, was also living in the capital of the British Empire, which was developing rapidly. That God-slayer was not a good person. He was even more ridiculous than Tony, who was a battle maniac. He would treat gods as prey to satisfy his own interests. He would also kill at will because of his mood. He treated human life as a joke and was unscrupulous. It was said that such an existence visited Queen Victoria with a playful attitude at that time. In order to protect England and the Queen of England from the threat of the dangerous deicide, the Wise Men's Parliament was officially established to study the deicide. Thus, the nature of the Wise Men's Council continued, creating the existence of the Wise Men's Council that would study the God-slayer. Although the Sage Council was not a magic society, in order to research the God-slayer, the Council of Sages had gathered many people with sufficient power and ability. Among them, the most outstanding was the special advisor of the Sage Parliament, the former speaker with the title of Princess. It was said that the former speaker was an outstanding student, known as Princess. She was the daughter of Duke Godding. Not only was she a witch with enough spiritual power to brag about, but she was also recommended to be the Speaker of the Sage Parliament when she was only 16 years old. She was extremely knowledgeable. However, later on, for some unknown reason, this person who was known as the Princess stepped down from the position of the chairman and went into seclusion behind the scenes. On the surface, this princess only held the position of special advisor in the Sage Parliament, but in reality, she was still the person with the highest authority in the Sage Parliament. For something as important as the birth of a new God-slayer, the Sage Parliament would definitely receive news of it immediately. But for the princess to personally come out to meet someone is something that has never happened before. As they walked toward the agreed meeting place, Erica mentioned it casually. Presumably, that person should know that the two kings are about to duel in the capital of Italy, so he came to Rome in person, right? Noah could only smile bitterly in his heart as he knew what Erica was implying. It seemed that although the magicians of this world respected the God-slayers as kings, they secretly treated them as if they were dangerous people, which proved the saying, being with a king is like being with a tiger. Noah didn't know what kind of people the rest of the Godslayers were. But judging from Tony's personality, if the Godslayers were all people who lived unscrupulously, it was no wonder that others would treat them as dangerous people. In this regard, Noah naturally wouldn't say anything, nor would he make any promises, nor would he work hard to prove that he was different. He shook his head, ignored Erica's profound remarks, and Liliana, who nodded repeatedly, and walked forward. This also made Erica and Liliana give up persuading him. They were completely silent as they led Noah to the agreed meeting place. Not long after, the three of them arrived at a hotel. Compared to the hotel Tony was currently in, this hotel was not large in scale, giving people a feeling that it was ordinary and unsubstantial. However, as soon as Noah, Erica, and Liliana entered the hotel, a person dressed as a waiter immediately came out and respectfully led the three of them into a room in the hotel. There, a person had already arrived and was quietly waiting for Noah's arrival. "I've been waiting for a long time, Your Majesty." The one who said this was a dignified young lady sitting on a sofa. She looked like a dignified lady. The young lady was wearing a high-class white coat. Underneath the coat was a knitted dress and panties. She wore black boots on her feet. Her bright platinum hair hung softly on her back and slender shoulders. Her entire body exuded an extremely noble temperament. Her temperament was even above Erica's. "I'm Alice Louise Ove Nafar." The noble young lady stood up. Her every movement had a sense of elegance, but her tone was quite relaxed, giving people the feeling that she was speaking from the bottom of her heart, without any pretense. "Your Majesty, you can just call me Alice." Looking at the scene where Alice still exuded a noble and gorgeous temperament even when she didn't do anything special, Liliana, who had a more serious personality, froze on the spot, not knowing how to react. Erica, on the other hand, had an eager expression on her face, as if she wanted to compete with the young lady with the title of a princess in the way of a noblewoman. She wanted to show off her beauty, confidence, and temperament. If it weren't for Noah, she might have actually stepped forward. After all, this was a conversation between the Godslayer and the former president of the Sage Parliament. Be it in terms of identity, status, or obligation, Erica and Liliana should keep their mouths shut and show enough respect to the king who killed the Godslayer and the beautiful princess. However, Noah, who was supposed to respond to the princess' greetings, frowned slightly. He glanced at Alice, and after a while, his expression turned to surprise. "This feeling. You're not yourself, but in existence like a clone, right?" After hearing that, Erica and Liliana were both stunned. Alice was also stunned on the spot, but then she nodded in admiration. As expected of the king who was able to kill two of the highest level god of disobedience before becoming a god slayer. To be able to see through my true colors at a glance, even the rest of the god slayers would not be able to do so. You are really amazing. However, this should be called a ghost body. In the world of magic, it can also be called a plasma body. To put it in a very rough way, it is a soul clone created through mental induction. The real me is now sleeping in a bed in London. Alice blinked her eyes mischievously. "I'm not being disrespectful to the king, but my body can't support me on such a long journey from London to Rome, so please forgive me, Your Majesty." Upon hearing this, Noah remembered that Alice had stepped down from her position as the president of the Sage Parliament and went into seclusion behind the scenes. Alice looked to be only in her 20s, about the same age as Noah. At this age, girls should be more active, but Alice had stepped down from her position as the president and chose to retire. That should be because of Alice's poor health, right? "I don't mind this kind of thing." Noah shook his head and looked at Alice. "Compared to this, I'm more concerned about the reason you called me here." "There are two reasons." Alice didn't beat around the bush and said with an elegant smile. "The first reason is to see what kind of king can kill the two highest level god of disobedience at the same time before becoming a godslayer." "I see." Noah raised his eyebrows. "Your Sage Parliament is an organization that specializes in studying godslayers, so you're here now to test me?" "No, no matter what, this is too rude to the king." I naturally won't do such a thing. Alice denied with a smile. Why don't you just take it as a young girl's curiosity at its peak? Noah immediately took a deep look at Alice and curled his lips into a smile. Then, what's the second reason? I believe the king has already guessed it. Alice looked at Noah closely. It's about your duel with Ching. Chapter 482. When Alice stated the second reason for her visit, Erica and Liliana both showed an, as expected, expression. Noah was the only one who felt extremely helpless when he heard that Alice was treating his duel with Tony as a major event. I already said that I would pay attention to the surroundings and not let ordinary people get involved. At most, I'll just destroy some buildings. Is there a need to be so exaggerated? Noah naturally didn't think that it was exaggerated. Because this was also considered a good tradition of fairy tale, right? With Makarov as the leader, the magic shooters of fairy tale had always been unscrupulous. Needless to say, the teams of Naz, Gray, Elusha, Lucy, and the others would usually be unable to stop themselves because of some trivial matters when they were on a mission. They would even destroy half of the city where they were on a mission. And Makarov himself treated the council as trouble. Generally, the council's warnings would go in one ear and out the other, and only the especially important parts would be remembered in his heart. Coming from a fairy tale, with such a group of troublemakers, Noah really didn't take one or two buildings seriously. Of course, it wasn't that Noah didn't have common sense, but the trouble brought about by being indecisive during a battle was extraordinarily big, and Noah didn't want to be restrained because of this. After all, Noah was still a relatively strong person. It was fine to be scrupulous about the lives of ordinary innocent people, but if he still had to be scrupulous about not destroying the environment and not damaging the flowers and plants during a battle, then what was the point of fighting? He might as well go home and embroider. This was also the reason why Noah could lure Welslana and Mekar away for the safety of the residents of Sardinia, but could also shatter the uninhabited island and even the space itself for victory. To be precise, this cognition was not wrong. Being overcautious during a battle was obviously courting death. However, from an outsider's point of view, the trouble caused by this was not ordinary. Even the former president of the wise parliament has come to Rome to persuade you. Here, as a king, you should show your magnanimity and listen to our opinions. What do you think? Erica chose the right time to interrupt. After all, this is the capital of Italy. Salbalay isn't the type to care about his surroundings when fighting. At this time, we can only hope that the other king is rational. Although I don't want to admit Erica's words, I also think you should consider this point, Liliana said to Noah as though she was advising him. If it's possible, please cancel your duel with Salbat Ching. Noah was silent, but his eyes were fixed on Alice, which made her feel suspicious. Excuse me, is there anything strange about me? It's not like that. Noah suddenly smiled and spread his hands. Chapter 483. In the end, the meeting between Noah and Alice ended with an inconclusive result. The content of the meeting was equivalent to telling Noah that there was an arrogant person hiding in the dark in Ramali, Italy, who would target the deicide. It was very likely that this person would take the opportunity to do something when Noah and Tony were dueling. Because of this, Alice specially made a trip to Rome, Italy, to persuade Noah to give up the duel with Doni. However, Noah had no intention of giving up the duel with Doni. The agreement was one thing, and whether it would cause damage to the surroundings was another. Most importantly, given Doni's character, if he gave up the duel for such a reason, the idiot who would do anything to satisfy his desire for battle would definitely stir up the whole of Italy. Be it Alice, Erica, or Liliana, there was no way they wouldn't understand this. Therefore, after some hesitation, Alice had no choice but to give up and stay in Italy. It seemed that she was not going to leave before the duel between Noah and Doni ended. Before leaving, Alice also left Noah such a sentence. The god ancestor also has some connections with the Black Prince. If he knows that the god ancestor has come to Italy, then the Black Prince is very likely to come here as well. Although I don't want to admit it, that man is a dangerous person who will even plot against his own kind when necessary. Please be careful." After leaving this sentence, Alice left the hotel. Looking at Alice's disappearing figure, Noah fell into deep thought. Alexander Gascoigne, known as Yerek, was a noble man known as the Black Prince. Needless to say, the person who was specially mentioned by Alice was a god-slayer like Noah and Doni. Noah also heard the basic information about the god-slayers who were still alive in the world from Paul and Andre. Among them, the Black Prince Yerek was also mentioned. It was said that he was different from the other god-slayers. He was full of intelligence, good at scheming, and did not like to fight head-on. He was used to devising strategies to counterattack his enemies. The Black Prince Yerek's most famous power was the ability to allow him to enter a state of incredible speed, lightning spark. Once he used lightning sparks, Yerek's speed would increase to the true meaning of Godspeed. If it was more accurate to describe it, it would be the so-called lightning speed. Therefore, Yerek was also known as the Prince of Godly Speed. This power was almost exactly the same as the power of the phoenix in Noah's 10 incarnations. In addition, the other party was also good at strategizing. That was why Alice specifically mentioned it, telling Noah to be careful of this fellow who was very likely to come to Italy. We've just dealt with the invincible military god and the divine king of the Mediterranean Sea. Now, not only do we have to deal with that idiot Tony, but we also have to deal with the so-called god ancestor and his kind? Noah sighed heavily. In this world, I really can't stay idle. The Black Prince leads a magic association called the Royal Factory, which is hostile to the Sage Parliament, which was once led by Princess Alice, Erica said proudly, intentionally or unintentionally, with her chest out. In order to fight against the Black Prince, Princess Alice once joined forces with my uncle to fight against the Black Prince. Fight against the God Slayers? Noah looked at Liliana in astonishment. The princess and Mr. Paul joined forces to fight against the God Slayers? If it's a head-on confrontation in terms of strength, then it's impossible. Otherwise, the God Slayers would not be called the Demon King. Liliana's face was tense. However, Lord Paul is indeed an outstanding knight. In the battle against the Black Prince, after joining forces with Princess Alice, that lord still left behind many glorious achievements for humans. Thus, he obtained the title of Crimson Demon, and is a holy knight of the highest level. Just like you, before you became the God Slayer, didn't you also block Mr. Salba's demon sword? Liliana glanced at Noah. Even if you can't fight against Mr. Salba, it's a fact that you blocked Mr. Salba's demon sword. That's quite an amazing achievement. Compared to you at that time, Princess Alice and Mr. Paul only achieved a similar achievement after joining forces. But it's still amazing for the human race. I'm not afraid to tell you that my goal is to inherit the title of the Crimson Demon left by my uncle. No, it should be said that it's my ambition. It's something I must do. Erica had a fierce smile on her face. If the Black Prince really comes to Italy, I'm looking forward to fighting with him. Erica. Liliana was speechless. Don't tell me you really want to fight against the God Slayer? Lily, didn't you say that it's impossible to compete in terms of strength? But the example of Princess Lily and Uncle also told us that apart from strength, there are many other ways for us to deal with the God Slayer, Aaliyah said with a fearless smile. No matter what, I'm not so self-righteous as to think that I can defeat a God Slayer with my strength. Lily, you don't have to worry about me. I'll be satisfied as long as I can obtain the merit of inheriting the title of the Crimson Demon. Liliana seemed to want to say something, but in the end, she chose not to say it. She turned her head away and fell into silence. Seeing this scene, Noah understood the relationship between Erica and Liliana. Although the Copper Black Cross and the Bronze Black Cross were enemies, Erica and Liliana were not only the only two prodigies in Italy who had obtained the rank of Grand Knight when they were still underage, but they were also childhood sweethearts. Each of them regarded the other as their competitor. Even if it was not obvious on the surface, Erica and Liliana did have a good relationship. They both cared about each other from the bottom of their hearts, right? Just as Noah, Erica, and Liliana fell into an indescribable silence at the same time, an extremely terrifying curse power and aura suddenly rose from the sky outside and gradually approached. Erica and Liliana were shocked at the same time. Their hearts tightened, and they subconsciously tensed up their bodies and entered a battle stance. This aura. Noah's eyes suddenly narrowed, but a smile appeared on his face. That's right. He heard that I've returned to Italy, but I didn't go directly to him. That idiot will definitely rush over because he can't wait, right? With that, Noah lifted his feet and walked out of the hotel. Could it be that the owner of this cursed power is? Erica seemed to understand something and hurriedly said to Liliana. Quick! Lily! Let's evacuate the surrounding crowd. Liliana also seemed to understand Erica's thoughts and rushed out with Erica without saying a word. As Noah walked out of the hotel, a figure surrounded by terrifying curse power and aura came into his sight. The person was holding a long box in his hand. As he walked in the direction of Noah, he took out a crude knight's sword from the long box and stared at Noah. His eyes shone with an unprecedented bright light. I swear here that I will not allow anything that I can't cut to exist. This sword can cut through everything on the ground. It's an invincible blade. When the invincible words slowly came out of Tony's mouth, the massive curse power on his body flowed into his hand, turning the hand holding the sword into a silver steel arm. Seeing this, a glint appeared in Noah's eyes as he slowly walked forward. I am the strongest, and I hold all victory in my hands. Be it human or demon, I am the one who destroys the hostility of all enemies. I will destroy any enemy that stands in my way. Noah's authority was based on Welslana, fusing Noah's own power with Mecker's power to create 10 clones. Therefore, the words Noah chanted were also Welslana's holy words. These words could make the curse power in Noah's body active and boil, allowing him to exert more than 120% of his power. There was no need for words or pleasantries. The next moment, two massive waves of curse power collided. Chapter 484. He would use a period of time to explore his new power, and then come back to fight Tony. This was the first thought that came to Noah when he first reincarnated as a god slayer and realized that his power system had undergone a great change. But after that, Noah found that this idea was a big mistake. Because it was a complete waste of time. The great ritual left behind by Epimetheus and Pandora to reincarnate a human as a god slayer, perhaps because it was too messy, there were many strange problems. On the surface, the god slayer was only similar to human beings, but its nature was actually more similar to that of wild beasts, magical beasts, mythical beasts, and even gods. Naturally, even the rest of its body would be very similar to that of humans. And just like how a beast would not work hard to learn how to bite its prey, it was completely impossible for a god slayer to learn how to do it on the ground. Therefore, the god slayer's authority could only be honed on the battlefield and in actual combat. In other words, as long as he continued to fight, Noah's authority would become stronger and stronger, and the authority would become more and more familiar to him, and naturally, he would be able to practice it. Of course, unlike other god slayers, Noah could not only make his authority stronger and stronger in battle, but also because the ability to limit was integrated into his authority. As long as Noah did not use his authority would enter a state of self-enhancement. However, once he entered a combat state, his authority would become more and more proficient, and he would be able to use it naturally. This was a fact that was true. Therefore, when Tony came in front of Noah with a violent battle intent and curse power, Noah's whole body and mind heated up, and he instantly entered a state of combat. It was at this time that the spirit of language, which made the curse power and power boil, and allowed him to exert more than 120% of his power, suddenly appeared in Noah's mind, and was chanted by Noah. Immediately after that, the methods of using the authority of the 10 avatars of Storm, Giant, White Horse, Draconian, Golden Wolf, Priest, Phoenix, Elf, Thunder, and Warrior emerged from the depths of Noah's memory, including a deeper level of application and ability. Noah did not know that even if he entered a state of combat, it was very illegal to obtain such an exaggerated level of proficiency and use of the authority at the beginning. Logically speaking, when he first became a god slayer, Noah's first battle would at most obtain 2 or 3 avatars to use. It would be too exaggerated to be proficient in all of them at once. However, it was unknown whether it was because of Noah's physique, or because Noah was different from other god slayers, and directly absorbed the power of God and made it his own. Noah was so lucky that he understood how to use his authority well. Therefore, the moment Tony rushed over, Noah stopped in his tracks, and the cursed power in his body was raised. I, with my violent heart, cover the sky tightly, and declare, roll up a storm for me, rain for me, and never allow you to disobey my command. When this sentence, which seemed to be a declaration to heaven and earth, slowly reverberated, the sky suddenly turned dark. A thick layer of dark clouds appeared out of nowhere, and covered the entire sky, causing an oppressive atmosphere to pervade the whole world. Tony, who was rushing in Noah's direction, did not even have time to swing his demonic sword when he suddenly felt a strong sense of danger in his heart. His expression tightened, and he stopped moving, and without hesitation, he stepped on the ground and retreated. Whoosh! Almost at the same time, a tornado suddenly descended from the dark clouds. It cut through the air at an incredible speed and fiercely landed on the ground. Bang! Accompanied by a loud noise, the ground touched by the tornado seemed to have been drilled into by something terrible. It suddenly exploded into scattered fragments and rocks, and was swept into the tornado. The tornado fell exactly where Tony was just a second ago. Kacha kacha. The ground that was touched by the tornado continued to crack, turning into pieces of gravel and rock. They were sucked into the tornado and spread to the surroundings. Kacha kacha. In the surroundings, the buildings began to make creepy cracking sounds, and they were on the verge of collapsing. Not long after, some of the smaller buildings were uprooted and sucked into the tornado, twisting into pieces. Looking at the tornado that suddenly fell from the sky and instantly turned the ground with a range of more than 100 meters into a deep pit, uprooting and crushing buildings, and rolling up gravel and rocks, and spreading to the surroundings, not to mention Tony, even Noah could not help but be shocked. Storm, an incarnation formed by combining Wellislana's incarnation of strong wind and Mecker's storm. It could cause a strong storm, and to a certain extent, it could dominate the sky and summon a storm. Noah knew the ability of this incarnation of storm, but he did not expect it to be so strong. Dominating the sky, Noah had seen it. However, what was this so-called strong storm all about? This had directly summoned a tornado and raised the surrounding area to the ground. The scale of that tornado was no joke. It was definitely comparable to those natural catastrophes. Was the power of an incarnation so exaggerated? No wonder Erica and Liliana were so afraid of the battle of the God Slayer. In fact, Noah did not think about it. The incarnation of storm was formed by combining the powers of the 2 highest level gods, and it was a world of difference from the power of an incarnation of Wellislana. Even Wellislana's incarnation of strong wind could cause a tornado, and Mecker dominated the entire sky, causing Sardinia to fall into the range of the power of storm. Now, after the fusion of strong wind and storm, that a storm naturally had the possibility of going up a level. It would definitely not be weak. Therefore, it was not that the God Slayer was too frightening, but Noah's storm incarnation physique created by the fusion of the power of strong wind and storm was truly frightening. To put it bluntly, the power of the 10 incarnations formed after the fusion of physiques was terrifyingly strong. After all, that was the power formed by the fusion of the power of one person and 2 gods, Noah, Wellislana, and Mecker. How could it be weak? With the 10 incarnations, Noah's strength had already been raised to another dimension, and he was definitely not weaker than any God Slayer in this world. That was the truth. Oh! While Noah was still surprised by the huge scale of the tornado, on the other side, Tony was affected by the rapidly expanding tornado. With a loud cry, his body was directly involved in the tornado. A sword that can pierce through all enemies with a single wave. In order to deprive all life, host the glory, Tony, who had seen with his own eyes the fate of the buildings involved in the tornado, did not hesitate to chant the spirit of words. His right hand that had turned into steel flashed with a silver radiance and poured into the knight's sword. Clang! In the next moment, a brilliant sword light suddenly appeared from the tornado. From top to bottom, it pierced through space and swept past the huge tornado that was still expanding in an extremely orderly manner. Poochie! Under the slash of the magic sword that could cut through everything in the world, even the tornado that was comparable to a natural disaster trembled and was neatly cut in half. When Noah saw this, he reacted to the situation and instinctively chanted the spirit of words. Wind, wind, don't let the enemy escape. Offer up your final glory. As soon as his voice fell, the tornado that was neatly cut in half stagnated. Then, as if something had expanded from within, it suddenly exploded. Boom! Amidst the violent loud noise, the huge tornado directly exploded, turning into a shockwave that spread out in all directions. Chapter 485. Boom! The loud sound that made people's hearts shrink turned into a sound wave, reverberating under the dark sky and constantly reverberating like an echo. The huge tornado suddenly burst open, turning into an impact wave that surged in all directions like a tide, covering every corner of the surrounding area. Pa 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 pa. At this moment, whether it was the ground, the asphalt road, the buildings, or the vehicles parked around, they were all swept up by the violent impact wave, and even crushed by the strong wind pressure, turning into small pieces of debris that shot around like bullets. As a result, even Noah himself was affected by the shock waves. His body was blown away, and he did not know how many times he rolled in the air before he reacted. He used the power of the storm incarnation to calm down the wind that was acting on his body and summoned by himself. It was not until now that Noah finally understood what the incarnation of the storm was all about, and what it meant to be able to cause a strong storm. The storm in this sentence didn't refer to the literal storm, but violent wind. Including gale, whirlwind, typhoon, and even tornado, these winds that could be called violent could be caused when Noah used the incarnation of storm, and they could be freely controlled by Noah according to his will. Of course, because it was the first time he used the incarnation of storm, Noah couldn't control the power of storm at will. As a result, he summoned the largest tornado. If the tornado just now continued to expand, then, in the end, even the whole of Italy could be covered with a supergiant tornado, and it would really destroy the whole of Italy. However, at that time, whether Noah's cursed power could support the expansion of the tornado to the extent that it could cover the whole of Italy was unknown. Noah, who had calmed down the wind, landed on the ground and looked forward, and then his expression became wonderful. Gone. Everything was gone. As far as the eye could see, except for the place behind Noah and an unknown distance away, the asphalt road, buildings, cars, and the ground that should have existed there had all disappeared. What was left was only a huge deep pit, and scattered pieces of debris of various buildings, asphalt roads, and cars all over the pit. Seeing this scene, Noah's heart started to beat uncontrollably. It was caused by the shock of his current power and the fear of the consequences. Erica and Liliana should have gone to evacuate the crowd, right? After glancing around the deep pit, Noah, who found no trace of anyone, murmured this sentence like a prayer. If he didn't know that Erica and Liliana would definitely evacuate the crowd the moment he walked out of the hotel, Noah wouldn't have directly confronted Tony. Now, Noah could only pray that Erica and Liliana could evacuate the crowd in time. Otherwise, he would really be guilty. Ha 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 ha. At this moment, a loud laugh sounded from one of the piles of debris in the huge pit. You're indeed worthy of being my opponent. You've just become my kind, and you already have such a degree of power. I was right about you. Tony, who was laughing joyfully, pushed away the debris piled on top of him and stood up with a bang. Taking a closer look, Tony was not injured at all in the impact that seemed to be able to destroy the world. This was because nearly 100 cuneiform imprints appeared around Tony as if they were protecting him, and they were slowly fluctuating. Noah recognized those characters. They were the runic characters that originated from Northern Europe. Of course, that was not the runic magic that Noah had mastered before, but the sacred characters that originated from the myths and were mastered and used by the god of magic. That was no longer magic or magic, but the real power of God. The power of authority. In front of him was the huge pit that he created, and behind him was the perfect environment. Standing on the edge of the line, Noah cast his gaze on the cuneiform text on Tony's body, which was the rune text that was fluctuating around Tony. As you can see, this is my second authority. Tony felt Noah's gaze on him, patted his body and lifted his knight's sword. Those people from the parliament seem to call it steel protection. It allows me to transform my entire body into steel. No matter if its weight or hardness, it will be increased to an unimaginable level. With such a body, even that tornado you used just now won't be able to do anything to me. Furthermore, because of the increase in weight, if you were to be hit by my fist, that wouldn't be a joke. Tony laughed. That's practically immortal. But Noah knew it without Tony saying it out loud. As an expert in the field of runic characters, Noah could tell at a glance that the characters surrounding Tony were the steel runic characters. The effect of the characters was similar to the hardened runic characters. Both characters could increase the hardness and weight of the user. However, there were pros and cons when comparing steel and hardened. For example, the steel runic characters could increase the hardness and weight to the level of the toughest steel, but it would also be fixed at the steel level of hardness. On the other hand, the hardened runic characters could be continuously increased. As long as there was enough magic in quantity, it would not be difficult to increase the hardness of steel. However, that was only when compared to the steel runic characters. Moreover, the steel runic characters were at the level of magic. The runic characters on Tony's body were at the level of authority, and there were nearly 100 of them. Perhaps the hardness and weight of his body had reached an extremely terrifying level. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was immortal. With this body and the magic sword, these two authorities have always been the main components of my battle strength. As for the other two authorities, one of them is basically useless in battle, and the other one will affect me. If I use it, I will only use it when my life is on the line. Saying that, Tony looked at Noah with a burning gaze filled with battle intent. Can you make me use that authority? After saying that, Tony's right hand flashed with a silver light again, and a huge amount of magic power suddenly wrapped around his knight's sword. Noah, who had seen Tony's magic sword countless times, suddenly had a cold look in his eyes. In his mind, the outline of the stone plate connecting the 10 incarnations suddenly turned, and a pointer on the stone plate stopped on another image. Fear those with wings. Both the evil and the powerful fear me because of my wings. My wings will bring you a curse, and the evil will not be able to hit me. A brand new language burst out from Noah's mouth and turned into a new power that filled Noah's body. Then, Noah felt it. His vision, senses, and thoughts were all going through super acceleration. On the contrary, everything around him was going through super acceleration. At this moment, Noah obtained a speed that surpassed everything. Thus, Noah took a step to the side. In Tony's eyes, Noah's figure seemed to have turned into a phantom as he abruptly teleported to the side for an extremely long distance. Clang! At the same time, a sword flashed past Noah's original position and landed in the air. Noah, who had entered the super speed state, clearly saw this scene. He curled the corners of his mouth and shot towards Tony like a phantom. Before Tony could react, he suddenly appeared in front of him and punched towards Tony's chest. However, what happened next shocked Noah greatly. That was because the fist that was supposed to hit Tony's chest drew a huge arc and hit empty space. Phoenix, the authority from Velislana, which allowed one to obtain a speed that surpassed everything. However, although Noah obtained a speed that was too high, due to the excessive speed, his attacks could not accurately land on his target. Therefore, Noah's punch that was supposed to land on Tony's chest went past Tony's position due to the excessive speed. It was the same principle that if a person were to run at full speed, they would not be able to control their body due to inertia and would only be able to stop after a certain distance. This incarnation is a little troublesome. Chapter 486. Chi. Amidst the faint sound of breaking air, a figure suddenly flashed in front of Tony like a meteor. Then it directly passed by Tony and rushed to the back of Tony. That was the scene when Noah couldn't accurately control his attack, causing his fist to hit the air and his figure to directly pass by Tony. It was a tornado just now, and now it's super speed. Could it be that the tornado was the power that you stole from Mekl, who controlled the sky, the storm, and the lightning, and this super speed was stolen from Welslana? Tony was shocked when he realized what was going on, and his face was brimming with a bright smile. That's similar to Yarek's authority, but I heard that when he first obtained this authority, he suffered a lot because of it. There are a lot of problems with using this authority of God's speed. It's not something that can do a lot of things. For example, the inability to accurately attack was one of the problems. In addition, entering the super speed state would make Noah's senses go through super speed. If he kept in this state, it would be like entering a world where time was constantly increasing, and it would make his senses dull. As for the other problems that would cause side effects to the body, they were eliminated by Noah's physique. Even so, there were many problems with the super speed brought by the Phoenix avatar. Also, although this speed is amazing, it's a pity that it's just speed, it's useless against me. Tony raised the knight's sword in his hand, and his eyes bloomed with a terrifying look like a wild beast. I've trained my eyesight a little too much. For example, I'll stare at the falling rain seriously and aim at one of the raindrops. The moment the raindrops fall in front of me, I'll swing my sword and cut the targeted raindrops in half. Thus, I've developed the ability called Mind's Eye in Chinese wuxia novels. So, no matter how fast you are, you can't hide from my eyes. The moment he finished speaking, Tony suddenly took a step forward, as if he could see through Noah's movements. He directly stabbed the knight's sword that was surrounded by a large amount of magic. Noah, who was in the super speed state, flashed out as if he teleported. At the same time Tony's sword stabbed out, his body directly appeared in front of Tony's sword. Noah's expression changed at the sudden attack, which was like a foresight. If it was a normal person, they would have directly hit Tony's magic sword, but Noah had superb senses and felt the trajectory of Tony's magic sword in advance. Just as Noah was about to collide with Tony's magic sword, he abruptly cancelled his phoenix transformation and leaped to the side. Clang! In the next second, Tony's magic sword flashed and swept forward, cutting the ground where Noah was originally at into two halves, creating a long gully. The sword didn't lose any momentum and continued forward with a sharp sound. At this moment, Noah's eyes flashed and he once again used the Phoenix avatar. Wang! In the state of super speed, this punch would only land on empty space. However, the moment he raised his fist, Noah immediately cancelled the use of the Phoenix incarnation, allowing his body's speed to return to normal as he raised his fist. The giant that blots out the sky supports the heaven and earth with his hand. I will let this divine power flow into my body. From now on, I will display the ultimate power that no one can match. In Noah's mind, the stone plate connecting the 10 avatars rotated from the phoenix to the indomitable giant. Wang! At this moment, Noah felt as though his body had been directly injected with a terrifyingly powerful strength, causing his raised fist to seem as though it could split the heavens and earth. It carried with it an extremely terrifying pressure. At this moment, Tony was still in the posture of thrusting out his sword. Feeling the terrifying pressure coming from behind him, his heart fiercely tightened. Hi-ya! It was only for a moment. Accompanied by a violent roar, Noah raised his fist and suddenly swung it down. The air cracked as if it couldn't bear the weight. Amidst the violent sound of the explosion, a violent wind blew and his fist landed heavily on Tony's back. Dong! Before he could even let out a scream, Tony was smashed into the ground by an unimaginably terrifying force, sinking into the ground. Bang! Like a meteor crashing into the ground, the terrifying force not only smashed Tony into the ground, but also shattered the ground, bursting out a deafening roar. As the ground trembled and shattered, the huge crater that had been created by the eruption of the huge tornado shook, and the range of the crater expanded from the original several hundred meters to a range of over 1,000 meters. In the legends, the god known as the great hero, Hercules, was a god of strength who could lift the sky. Whether it was Welslana or Mekl, they had a deep relationship with this god of strength. Therefore, Welslana's bull incarnation represented monster strength. When using this incarnation, Welslana would obtain divine power no less than that of Hercules. Mekl's appearance was also based on Hercules, so he also had unparalleled divine power. Giant was an incarnation formed by combining Welslana's bull incarnation with Mekl's appearance. When using this incarnation, one could obtain monster strength that was far beyond the limit. Its power was enough to split mountains and rivers. Just like how the incarnation of Storm became extremely terrifying after fusing with Strong Wind and Storm, the incarnation of Giant became extremely terrifying after fusing with Welslana and Mekl's monstrous strength, which gave Noah a terrifying divine power. Of course, it was not enough to lift the sky, but it was definitely enough to split mountains and rivers. At this moment, the violent earthquake phenomenon affected the entire crater that was over 1,000 meters wide and even outside the crater. It was as if a shockwave had shaken the ground, slowly spreading outwards. Buildings began to sway, and some of them even collapsed. In the crater that suddenly expanded to over 1,000 meters, the buildings that were originally in the area also sank into the ground and turned into ruins. With a corner as the center, the entire crater cracked open like a spider web. It looked as if a demon was about to break through the ground and crawl out, making people feel a chill down their spine. Phew! Noah, who had punched the ground, let out a long breath and slowly retracted his fist. At this moment, he felt the superpower flowing through his body and couldn't help but glance at the human-shaped crater in front of him. Don't tell me he's dead. Tony had the steel barrier, which was called the authority of an undying body. Nearly 100 cuneiform runes that could make people as hard as steel made his body's strength reach a terrifying level. However, Noah clearly felt that his punch using the giant incarnation had indeed broken through Tony's steel barrier and landed on his body. Even so, it still brought disaster to the surrounding area. One could only imagine how terrifying the power contained in Noah's punch was. To put it bluntly, even if the giant mecha came in front of Noah, Noah was confident that he could turn him into a meteor and disappear into the sky with a single punch. This way, even if Tony had the steel barrier to counteract most of the force, it wouldn't be strange for him to die. However, Noah wasn't worried about this at all. This was because Noah knew how tenacious the life force of the God-Slayer was. Even Noah had that elf incarnation that could bring the dead back to life, so Tony definitely wouldn't die so easily. But after being buried for so long, it should be possible to suffocate him to death, right? Noah looked down at the human-shaped crater in front of him and helplessly jumped in after a while. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.